5 Live Formula One.
Good evening and welcome along to Sao Paulo. We're in Interlagos, south of Brasilia, west of Rio de Janeiro at the Autodromo Jose Carlos Pace. We've had all of our sprint action so far. Lando Norris winning after team orders for Piastri saw him let Norris by. But now all focus is on qualifying for Sunday's Grand Prix. But about half an hour, 40 minutes ago, the clouds suddenly darkened and a thunderstorm arrived. Buckets of rain lashing down on the circuit, and the start of qualifying will be delayed. So, attempting to guide you through hopefully qualifying coverage is myself, Harry Benjamin. Alongside me is the former Renault Formula One driver Jolyon Palmer and the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson. But this is a lot of rain. You might even be able to hear it as well. The rain still dropping down. But I suppose, Andrew, first of all, the main reason why we don't go out in this is because it is simply too dangerous for cars and for those in the grandstands. Yeah,
this track's called Interlagos. That's the name of the area of Sao Paulo that it's in. Means between lakes. There's two big lakes here. It looks like the entire contents of those lakes are being emptied on the track at the moment. Really heavy subtropical rain in Sao Paulo, as it often is for the Grand Prix. And Formula One cars they just can't run when it's this wet because of danger, the lack of grip basically, and aquaplaning is the biggest problem with that, as Jolyon can explain in a minute. The cars run very low. Any puddles on the track, they're liable to skate across the top of them, and the drivers become passengers in that situation. The other issue is visibility. Even if the cars can run, the drivers can't see where they're going. And again, Jolyon can tell us this weather actually reminds me it's even worse right now than the weather in 2016, when Jolyon was a Renault driver and he crashed because the weather was so bad. Kimi Raikkonen had a very near miss on the straight.
A lot of other people crashed as well, Andrew. I wasn't headlining that day.
I wasn't blaming you in any way, Jolyon, just trying to explain the difficulty facing the drivers. And it's going to be quite some delay because we've seen some pictures of the weather radar. There's a lot of rain heading south across the city of Sao Paulo, so we could be here for quite a while in this situation.
We certainly could. So buckle up. I mean, Jolyon, can you just expand on a couple of those points then Andrew mentioned? I mean, obviously we've seen cars running in the rain a lot, but what happens when a car aquaplanes? What causes that to happen?
I actually think Andrew covered it off pretty nicely, really. You got two ways to aquaplane. One is when the tyres don't clear enough water, and there's grooves in the intermediate and deeper grooves in the full wet tyre. And when those grooves are not enough to disperse the water, then the water basically just provides a sheen over between the tyre and the asphalt, so that you don't get any grip from the tyre. But then, as Andrew described, the cars run so low to the ground as well. Sometimes you can actually just have the underbelly of the car is also just lifted up by the water as well. If there's too much water, and there's a lot at the moment, so it's twofold. And when that happens, the driver is a passenger. You no longer have control of the car, effectively. It happens in one snap. You can feel grip in some section, then you find this load of water and you just aquaplane and go skating to the barriers or the scenery, wherever it may be. And so it is a dangerous situation where skill is not really anything that can help you out.
We shall see, hopefully, when we get an update shortly of when this session will be resumed, or will be even started, first of all. But, Andrew, I mean, what are the options available to the FIA, to race control, if we're expecting an update in 45 minutes or so? If it's still not ready, then what are the options available to us?
Well, we get an update in 1 minute. That's the first update. I would imagine that will tell us we're going to get another update in a few minutes' time. That's what tends to happen in these situations. So it's 3 o'clock in Sao Paulo at the moment. Dusk is around about 6:30 normally, although it might be a bit earlier today because it's so dark already. They can basically keep going and will keep going to try and run it until it goes dark, effectively. So we've got 3 hours, which we could be waiting around, or maybe 2 hours, because obviously you've got to get it done before before it does actually go dark. And then the option is to run qualifying on Sunday before the race, Sunday morning basically. The race is due at 2 o'clock in Sao Paulo on Sunday, so that's 5 o'clock in the afternoon in the UK. And the last time that happened, if I've remembered correctly, was Japan in 2019. I was there, and there was a typhoon coming in, and it was a really nasty typhoon. It dodged the circuit mostly in the end, but it still got very wet and windy on the Saturday. We were all told to stay away from the track. Qualifying was run on Sunday morning, so you get qualifying and a race in one day. I'm not saying that that's definitely going to happen, but if the weather doesn't improve, that is quite a likely scenario, I think.
It's set in at the moment, isn't it? It's due to keep raining with some intensity, I think, for another hour, according to my very amateur weather sources. So I'm not expecting anything to go in a hurry. But there has been many occasions where there's a long delay and then finally you do get cars on track. So we're in for the long haul. And hopefully we do get some action, because this is actually a mouth-watering prospect if we did get underway. The championship's coming to a head. Norris took 3 points back on Verstappen in the sprint earlier on. Verstappen has a 5-place grid penalty hanging over him, but then you put these sort of weather conditions around already an iconic circuit and it will make some great action. But the question is when.
Well, where do you want to start, Palmer? We've got some talking to do. What do you want to start with?
Well,
weather events.
Let's start
go.
with the result of the sprint. So Lando Norris cut Max Verstappen's championship lead by 3 points in the sprint. Is that right? It is right, isn't it?
3 points in the end, yeah.
Because although Verstappen finished third on track behind a McLaren 1-2, Norris was handed the win by Oscar Piastri, his teammate, late on in the race. It all got a bit sketchy with McLaren with a virtual safety car. It could have gone wrong for them, but they managed to pull it off in the end. Verstappen was then penalised for going too fast under that virtual safety car period. 5-second penalty that dropped him back behind Charles Leclerc, who he'd overtaken 6 laps from the end. So 44 points now is the gap between Norris and Verstappen as we head into the Sao Paulo Grand Prix tomorrow.
Yeah, it really is crucial so far for McLaren and Lando Norris to pick up every point they can. But I mean, Jolien, even though it worked out for McLaren in the end of that sprint, does that foreshadow kind of the indecisiveness there for what is to come in a Grand Prix scenario? Verstappen looked strong. He finally got past Charles Leclerc, and McLaren had so many opportunities earlier in that race to switch the positions earlier than they actually did. And it's not the first time either we've seen indecision from the pit wall at McLaren. Is this something they've really got to iron out now?
Well, they'll be hoping that there's going to be a nice easy run for them this weekend, with Verstappen having that 5-place grid penalty, and they're on a home run with what seems to be the fastest car. But this sort of weather changes the game for McLaren, and we've already seen this year races like Silverstone where they really stuffed it up on 2 occasions, one with Piastri, the other one with Norris, and lost what should have been a winning position. Montreal as well, Lando Norris was winning the race, and in wet weather conditions the track dried and McLaren were not 100% on the pulse, and another race slipped through their fingers. So I think there are creaks in the McLaren strategy department. I think we've seen more than creaks at times, and this sort of weather, which we're also expecting tomorrow, some heavy showers, it opens the door for more uncertainty. And I think when you're looking at a tense, close championship battle between Norris and Verstappen, when you have these unpredictable days where you've got a choice of tyre to be made, you've got a choice of when to be on circuit, communication's so critical, you trust Red Bull in this situation a lot more than you trust McLaren. So they've really got to prove everyone wrong.
Yeah, I agree with Jolien completely. This is sort of best possible scenario for Red Bull, given the situation they're in this weekend. The car's not that quick. It's not perhaps as slow as they were worried it might be after qualifying yesterday, sprint qualifying yesterday, I should say. But they've got a 5-place grid penalty. That could mean Verstappen in a dry qualifying session might have ended up starting the Grand Prix somewhere between 8th and 10th, depending on how quick the Ferraris are in relation to the Red Bulls. But wet weather, McLaren are quick in the wet weather. Lando Norris is particularly good in the wet, but so is Max Verstappen. And it'd be a lot harder, in my opinion, for Verstappen to come through the field in the dry than it will be in the wet.
I completely agree. Yeah, I think that really changes the nature of this 5-place grid penalty that he's got as well. I'm also thinking How nice would it be if Brazil was the title decider again? Do you remember Andrew, do you remember the 1976 World Championship decider?
I don't remember it. I was still quite young then, but I do know what you're talking about, yes. You're talking about Fuji 76, the very famous race, a showdown between James Hunt and Niki Lauda, where Niki Lauda abandoned his car after 2 laps because he said it was too dangerous to continue. The drivers had agreed not to race, although they all changed their minds once they got in their cars, apart from Lauda. Hunt went on to get the 3rd place that he needed to overhaul Niki Lauda's points lead in probably the race that began the climb of Formula One from being a sort of niche sport to being a huge global cavalcade that it is now.
What, that race? Was it a seminal? I didn't realise it was such a seminal moment.
Yeah, it was, because it was live on television, and that was not common in those days. And from the Hunt Lauda story, and particularly that was the year that Niki Lauda had his fiery crash at the German Grand Prix, was missing for 40 days, was given the last rites after that crash, came back for the Italian Grand Prix, finished 4th in one of the bravest acts I think any sport has ever seen. It really captured the public's imagination, and Formula One began to grow from that point on, became more and more of a live TV sport. Then in the 80s, Bernie Eccleston made it part of the contracts of the TV companies that they had to show all the Grand Prix, and it's grown and grown and grown since then.
And what was it, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I've lost track of time, but Rush brought that story back to life for the next generation as well, James Hunt and Niki Lauda. But my point was, in all of that,
strictly Brazil, but
in all of it, where the final race is gives so much jeopardy. And we're sitting here, eventually there will be some action, whether it's today or tomorrow, but the jeopardy when there is this rain. Do you remember 2016, the race that you were talking about, Andrew? It was the penultimate round because we still had Abu Dhabi to come that year. But Hamilton and Rosberg were doing battle in the championship, and everything that was going on there was in Rosberg's hands. But had he made any slip up, it would have opened the door for Hamilton to pinch that championship against the odds. And the rain does that. Whereas when you go to the last 2 races this year, are both in the desert, effectively, they're in the Middle East, with Qatar and then Abu Dhabi.
The last 3 races, in fact, because Vegas.
Yeah. So you've got 3 desert races to finish, but Vegas has some level of unknown itself. But Qatar and Abu Dhabi, permanent circuits, you don't have this level of jeopardy. And you think of some of the great title deciders of the past, including at this circuit, 2008 decided in the end with a little bit of rain, throwing what was a pretty routine race wide open. So I feel a little bit sad that we don't get that anymore.
I agree. I think I said it on our preview show. I mean, particularly with Brazil and rain, I get a lot of nostalgia out of that as well. I mean, I always go back to that 2012 race. Okay, only towards the end of that race was there rain coming down. But ultimately, I think it ended under safety car in the end, and that secured Vettel the championship that year. But I just remember vividly the rain lashing down, and Fernando Alonso standing in the Parc Fermé area. You could see his visor was up and just his eyes staring out for what seemed like an eternity. He just lost the title, his closest chance with Ferrari. It was such an evocative moment, made more pure by the fact we're in Brazil, the rain was lashing down.
It's one of the greatest sporting injustices in Formula One history, in my opinion, that Vettel won the championship that year, not Alonso. But anyway, we won't get bogged down in that. But it is a shame. I mean, I think Hamilton coined the key phrase here in Australia in 2020 when the race that didn't happen because of COVID. Cash is king, he said, as to why we're in Melbourne. That's why the final race is in Abu Dhabi, because they pay a lot of money for that privilege. But Jolene's absolutely right. It does take a lot of the drama out of the title decider, and it is a shame. But a lot of decisions in Formula One these days are made for that reason.
But rain can also upset the order as well. Here, a couple of years ago, it was with a sprint format, of course, but rain dictating and getting the best out of Kevin Magnussen, getting the pole for Haas. I mean, it throws up those unlikely results that I think that everyone up and down the paddock had a smile on their face over that one.
And 2009, Nico Hülkenberg on pole in a Williams.
10,
I think.
10?
Yeah. 2010.
Oh, so close, Palmer.
So close, but yet so far. But yeah, you get these odd events. So everyone should stay tuned, but it is going to be at least another half an hour away.
Yeah, well, look, as soon as we get any kind of update, the next one will be 3:30 local time. So in about 20 minutes or so, we'll get another update. But the rain is still lashing down. So we will leave you for the time being. Stay across the BBC Sport website app for the very latest updates. And as soon as we are hopefully able to get this session back underway this evening, we will let you know, and we'll come back and you can hear it all live in full. But for now, we will hopefully see you all in a little bit. Keep an eye on the BBC Sport website in the meantime.
5 Live Formula One.
Good morning and welcome back to Interlagos. It's a very early morning in Brazil to get qualifying, well, hopefully underway after yesterday's postponement. We've reshuffled the timings and we are looking at getting qualifying underway in the next 5 minutes. But there is still rain. It is much lighter than yesterday, but the track is wet and we're expecting rain to be the call of the day all day long. The race moved forward as well a couple of hours. At the moment in UK time, that is expected to get underway at 3:30 later this afternoon. But right now though, we're going to look forward to qualifying, and to do it alongside myself, Harry Benjamin, is the former Renault Formula One driver Jolyon Palmer, and the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson. Jolyon, we're back. We're ready to go qualifying. Is it good to go?
I'm ready to go. I've been ready to go for quite some time now. I think we're going to at least start Q1. I have to say the weather doesn't look that much different to yesterday afternoon. It's still sodden out there. It's still drizzling as well. The rain's maybe not quite as heavy as it was yesterday afternoon, but it has been, and the track is soaked. But let's hope we can get some running, and then it's just whether all the cars can stay on the track.
And Andrew, just to bring us up to speed on the regulations wise, there has to be a certain gap between the end of qualifying and the start of the race, doesn't there?
4 hours, yes. So they've moved the whole timetable forward today to give themselves some wriggle room. Basically, they've moved qualifying forward to 7:30 in the morning in Sao Paulo at the moment. Well, not quite, 7:26 right now actually, and they've moved the race to 12:30, which is an hour and a half earlier than it was meant to start. And the reason for that is that they want to give themselves the most window they can possibly have, because what happened yesterday was not only was it wet, but they were sort of butting up against dusk, and Sao Paulo being subtropical, dusk comes quite early. It was about 6:20 yesterday, presumably about the same sort of time today. So they've got a whole day to play with effectively, but there does have to be a 4-hour gap between whenever qualifying finishes and the start of the race.
Well, the last of the service vehicles are out on track at the moment and just making their way slowly back to their posts. Just in terms of temperature, it's 20 degrees air temperature, 22.4 track temperature, light rain. The grandstands are full with fans who are absolutely covered in their Pacamax and wet weather gear. And hopefully they're going to see some action. And indeed, all the cars have made their way out into the pit lane and are lining up right at the end, ready for that green light. So it looks very much like we're going to get some action here.
There could be an increase in rain in about 15 minutes or so.
So that was the radio message to Pierre Gasly in the Alpine. This is going to be a really fascinating start. Let's not forget there's massively high tension and high pressure on this qualifying session. Let's not forget Max Verstappen is carrying a 5-place grid penalty wherever he qualifies, but I think he's going to be a happy man with these conditions and the uncertainty that this provides. McLaren have looked really good. They were 1-2 in sprint qualifying and the race. They've had the race weekend under control in dry conditions, but now it's wet. It opens so many different things to happen, really. The strategy later on, being on the right tyre at the right time, and then we haven't even got to the drivers getting around a soaking wet 4 and a bit kilometre circuit with very little visibility. And this is the sort of conditions where the best drivers out there in the best cars can make simple, easy to make errors and blow a championship. This is huge. And with that rain coming in potentially 15 minutes, the first 15 minutes might be everything.
it's also conditions, Jolyon, where exceptional drivers can do exceptional things. So, you know, the likes of Lewis Hamilton, for example, the Mercedes is not competitive in the dry. Can he do something? Verstappen is outstanding in the wet. Norris is outstanding in the wet. Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin, he might be expected to be in the bottom 5 on the grid if it was dry. Can he do something? Anything can happen when it's like this, but the exceptional drivers do tend to stand out.
Well, Hamilton jumped into a Stefano Domenicali interview yesterday for the live F1 broadcast to the fans there, explaining what had happened, that we didn't get any running, and said we should have done some running, we should have got out there. So now they are getting out there in 20 seconds time. He certainly could be one to watch.
And it's Alex Albon in the Williams who has prime position to get out on track first. Full wet tyres bolted on to that Williams. Indeed, they'll get 2 sets of wet tyres and they'll have 5 sets of intermediate tyres in their locker throughout the remainder of today as the green light comes on and we get qualifying underway Sunday morning in Sao Paulo. And it's going to be tricky, this first session, Q1, 18 minutes and counting. Albon heading out of the pit lane now slowly, tentatively finding where those wet patches are going to be as the fans are greeted to a huge roar of the cars out onto the track. And it's Albon tentatively making his way through the left-hander of turn 4. Where are those damp patches going to be? It is indeed, and Q1 has just got underway. It is still light drizzle in Sao Paulo, but cars are heading out onto the track now tentatively to see how the conditions lie. Rain is expected to get more intense though in the next 15 minutes. So this first qualifying session absolutely critical, not only to set the grid, but also in the championship between Max Verstappen and Lando Norris.
So from what I'm seeing on these early laps, the track level of water is a lot, unsurprisingly, but it is the spray that's hanging around that's providing probably a bigger issue at the moment. Down towards turn 4, there is a real just mist hanging in the air from all the water that's being picked up from these F1 cars. Here's Lando Norris getting on the gas, coming out of Yunsao. Now, this should be flat out in the dry, and you can just hear how tentative he is on the throttle, building the speed now, and he's going to start a flying lap 2 minutes after he was the second car out to get onto circuit in the first place. There's a really early braking point for Norris. Down to 3rd gear for the first corner, finding some grip. It's so much easier at low speed when you can see and the tyres are working. When the speed builds, as it does for Norris again coming out of turn 3 here, the end of the centre S, then that's when you start to lose your visibility if there's any spray in the air.
We've already got the yellow flags out in sector 2 and 3. Norris coming through sector 2 now, makes his way through the left-hander of turn 4, round the outside of a Red Bull, which gets nicely out of the way. Just trying to see if there are any cars actually finding themselves off.
I wonder if it's Charles Leclerc, you know, in the Ferrari. No, Leclerc's still moving. We have got a yellow flag off. We have not seen why. Norris is coming up to that section now, into turn 8, the right-hander. Then you drop down into a long left-hander, and the track is green. So whoever it is must have gone off onto the grass, taken a long time to get back on, but the track is now green. So those at the front of the queue will get a time on the board. Norris, middle of the road through Vico de Pato, turn 9, the right-hander. Now coming through Magulio. It's such a difficult corner, and there will be a stream on the exit of it as you come down the hill and then quickly get on the brakes. It's going to be a complete lap for Lando Norris. Alex Albon's come through on a 1:32.4. Lando Norris is about to set a time, but it's such a long run up to the start-finish.
Out through the mist comes the Papaya McLaren and crosses the line, sets the fastest lap time so far. Only 2 laps on the board, but Norris with a 1:31.608 slots up into that P1 position. Then comes Albon. Gasly's just crossed the line as well and put himself up into 4th. Ocon was on a good lap for his first run out. He's gone fastest in the Alpine, and the reason for the yellow flag a little earlier, Liam Lawson finding the runoff area, just coming to a bit of a halt before he got back on track.
That was on Lawson's out lap that he had that in the RB coming in towards turn 12. There's another yellow flag out. Lawson managed to stay on the runoff area and not actually take to the grass, but he must have done a bit of a three-point turn to get going. There is now another car off there as Charles Leclerc finds another yellow flag at turn 12, which turns green, and he can now exit the final corner, head up the hill, have no visibility whatsoever, but at least get a time on the board. And these times could well count if the session is stopped at any moment.
I think that yellow flag was literally just in front of Charles Leclerc. It might have been Zhou Guanyu, who's the car ahead of him, but it went green just as Leclerc was coming up over the crest out of Zhengsao. And again, another yellow flag out as Ocon rises still to the top of the timings. Then Alonso now into second, Sainz, Norris, Albon, Russell, the top six. Leclerc came across the line to slot into seventh in his Ferrari.
So it was Zhou, and it was exactly the same as Lawson, just locking the front wheel, the left front coming into Zhengsao, spin turn from Zhou, and he got going a bit quicker than Lawson did. Andrew said this is the sort of day where skill can make such a big difference, innate talent, and I have to say we haven't really mentioned Esteban Ocon for many a week, but he's good in the wet conditions. He's had some of his best days in the wet, and on his first flying lap he is currently top spot with his old teammate Fernando Alonso alongside him. Verstappen jumps up to third, so that's important for Max to get a time on the board.
This is the time where we can see perhaps a little bit of a jumbled up order. Here's Norris on the radio.
Thoughts on the track?
Yeah, a bit of aquaplaning down to turn 4. Otherwise, not too bad, just low grip.
So, to be expected then, aquaplaning on the way to turn 4, otherwise low grip. And in terms of the conditions, well, if you're right behind a car, then you're going to be absolutely in the spray and visibility is going to be minimal. But if you can find yourself a decent place on the track, you can complete a decent lap. It's Ocon with the fastest lap time right now. He's a 10th clear of Alonso. Tsunoda's up to third. Then it's Perez, Verstappen the top 5, Sainz, Norris, Gasly, Albon, Russell is in 10th, Leclerc, Zhou 12th ahead of Piastri, Colapinto and Behrman the top 15, with everybody having set a lap time at the moment with the exception of Bottas, Hamilton and Stroll. Indeed, some lap times are being deleted due to track limits. Behrman, Hülkenberg, Bottas, Hamilton and Stroll are in that bottom 5 right now.
A couple of them have actually gone for doing a lap time under double yellow flags where we've had Lawson and Zhou off. So Hamilton has lost a time. It wasn't a particularly strong lap from Hamilton, but sometimes if you've got to put a lap on the board, it could be your first flyer, and it just doesn't count when you've got double wave yellows where we've had those 2 moments. So 11 minutes 30 seconds left on the clock. As it stands, this is a regular Q1 session. We're going to lose the bottom 5 cars, which includes Lewis Hamilton in 19th place, but there's still plenty of time for him in theory to get out of trouble. But in reality, if there's more rain coming, you don't ever want to be in those bottom 5 places as Ocon improves on his best time and extends his advantage at the front.
Ocon flying now nearly 3/10 clear of Alonso. Still 11 minutes to go in this session. Valtteri Bottas has found the runoff area at turn 4 and rejoined in his Sauber. Colapinto just put in a decent lap in his Williams. The Argentine driver has got himself up into 6th spot. He's 1.3 seconds off though Ocon's lap time. Esteban Ocon, who hasn't qualified inside the top 10 for a Grand Prix since Belgium, currently enjoying these conditions in his Alpine. And well, just mentioned Bottas going off at turn 4. Lance Stroll joined him as well a few moments ago, but no harm done there. As getting another replay as well of the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz, getting very close to going right into the back of the Mercedes of George Russell. That was a bit tight, Jolien, wasn't it?
It was. Literally looked like a race there for Sainz, who was trying to make his way past Russell. There are 20 cars out on circuit. There's big disparities between the fastest and the slowest, and it means that you might be on a great lap. You do 11 corners like a genius, and then you find someone that's just trying to find their feet around the lap. They're still pushing. Russell's in 15th place. Sainz wanted to go to the top, but had to work his way on a legitimate qualifying lap past Russell, who was also pushing.
10 minutes to go then of Q1, and every single car is out onto the track. Ocon is currently fastest. Stroll's just got up to 5th. Verstappen has improved his time but stayed in 6th place. Perez is fastest of anybody in the first sector, and this is the sound of the Mexican coming up through Zhengsao, through the flat-out left-handers in the dry. Not so much in these conditions. He's got a car in front of him. It's Pierre Gasly.
There doesn't seem to be that much standing water, so think about inters.
Interesting. Perez goes second. Tsunoda goes to the top, lowering the benchmark by a full 7/10 now as the times get better, and everyone's got to think about intermediate tyres. The bottom 5 includes Russell, Leclerc and Hamilton in 17th, 18th and 19th place. So if the times were frozen like this, we are going to lose 2 Mercedes and a Ferrari, but this is the sound on board one of those Ferraris. Charles Leclerc in 18th, picking the speed up, having more confidence now up the hill through those left-handers, and he's going to come over the line and should jump up, but there's a red flag. I think Leclerc's got it in just in time.
Oh, it went yellow and then it went red just as he came down into the Senna S's. Red flag out. Valtteri Bottas came out on the intermediate tyre as well, by the way, and it is a red flag for the Williams of Franco Colapinto, who has found himself in the wall through, I think that's off the exit of the left-hander of turn 3 that arcs to the left. He's saying he's okay, but he's got into the barrier. He's taking a bit of the advertising hoarding with him as well. He's still in the car, but that is a red flag, and with this being qualifying, the clock is stopped. It does not count down.
I tell you what, that was super tight for Leclerc. I'm not convinced he did get that time in before the red flag. It was really touch and go. It's hard to be absolutely sure whether the TV pictures are absolutely in sync with the timing screens, Jolien, but it was right on the edge.
I think he did by about a second. It was right on the edge. You could see it coming. You could see Leclerc coming over the line, and he was in the drop zone. And remember, Leclerc is third in the Drivers' Championship. I don't think he has a chance to win the Drivers' Championship with Norris and Verstappen still the 2 favourites, or 1 heavy favourite and an outside chance. But Ferrari are trying to win the Constructors' Championship today as well, and they do not need to lose Charles Leclerc in Q1. He jumped up to second, and I think it was just in time. Mercedes are now 18th and 20th with Russell and Hamilton, so they need no more rain whilst this crash is cleared up. And this is the crash from Franco Colapinto. Just lost it on traction coming through turn 3. Already was struggling for grip. Crunch into the barrier on the outside of the right-hander. And yeah, Colapinto wide at the apex at turn 1. That's absolutely normal.
Sorry, mate.
Wide through turn 1, but yeah, you stay off the racing line as much as you can in the wet where the rubber collects. Then he was on the apex at 2 fighting the car, and then through turn 3 where it eventually happened, the third part of a 3-part Senna S chicane, and he just tried to get on the gas too hard, found a load of moisture on the racing line and pitched off into the barrier.
And I don't think this delay is going to be that long. The barrier was not hit that hard. It doesn't look to be particularly badly damaged, so it shouldn't be that long before we get this session back underway again. I have to say turn 3, Jolien, is really notorious in wet weather. You get rivers running across the track there because it's at the bottom of the hill, at the bottom of the Senna S. And in 2003, about 4 or 5 cars went off there, one after the other, including Michael Schumacher.
It was more than that, wasn't it? Yeah. It was about 8 cars. Half the field were standing on the outside of the barrier watching the rest of the Grand Prix. That was another Brazilian thriller in 2003. There are treacherous spots on this circuit. I would say you're right. Exit at turn 3, you're trying to get on the throttle as Colapinto was, with a lot of steering lock on. You have to negotiate that long left-hander. And any time where you're trying to get on the gas and steering is a nightmare for these Pirelli tyres, particularly in these conditions. And that's what happened. But what does Descido de Largo mean?
Descent of the lake, so going downhill by the lake, basically.
And that is turn 4. So between turn 3 and 4, turn 4 is called Descido de Largo, the descent, and that is where the water is collecting. The descent of the lake is pretty much the disaster term of this weekend in Brazil. And that is where we've seen a lot of other drivers go off at turn 4. And then actually coming back up the hill, exit at turn 12 is also tricky.
But there are also little rivets forming as well across the main straight. Just where it dips down, it starts to collect the undulations here all throughout the track that really emphasise down that run towards turn 1 of the Senna S's. Red flag out, though, for Franco Colapinto, who found the wall on the exit of turn 3. He is out of the car. A little bit of damage to the barrier, damage certainly to the Williams car as well, and that's actually going to be a tight repair job depending on how much needs to be done on that Williams, because there's only a few hours till we go racing.
That'll be fine because it's a minimum of 4 hours until we go racing, and there wasn't a huge amount of damage, so I think Colapinto will be fine. If you completely total a car, then maybe it'll be sketchy to go out for the Grand Prix, but that was not such a heavy whack. It was a bit of a crunch, but I'm sure Colapinto will be fine. He was actually running in 9th place and doing a fairly solid job there, Franco Colapinto, and was just launching into another flying lap. His teammate Alex Albon is 16th, so for reference he was doing well, but when you crash, it's kind of all for nothing.
And Harry, this is why you were asking me earlier about the schedule, why there's 4 hours between qualifying and race. It's exactly the reason, because qualifying can be delayed. I think, is it the 5th or 6th time in Formula 1 history we've had qualifying on a Sunday morning? By the way, statistical quirk, the only time it's happened, every time it's happened, a German driver has ended up on pole position. But
Hulkenberg,
exactly,
rubbing his hands together today.
And he put it on pole here in the wet in 2010 in his debut season with Williams. You're right about the wet weather, Harry. There are rivulets, little rivers running through around various bits of the track, but that's what happens in Interlagos. I told you the session wouldn't be stopped for long because the cars are lining up at the entrance to exit the pit lane.
But I tell you what, the rain looks like it's starting to come down a little harder than it was when Q1 got underway. So the track has been declared clear. We're going to go green again, and indeed the clock is counting down to the restart. About 2.5 minutes then until we get back on track. At the moment in that elimination zone, it's Alex Albon, Zhou Guanyu, George Russell in the Mercedes ahead of Valtteri Bottas in the Sauber, and Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes P20.
We were told there was rain incoming 15 minutes into the session. We are now 15 minutes into the session. So this rain is forecast. It was forecast. And Mercedes have got to hope that with the cars getting back out there's still enough grip for their drivers to improve, because this would be an absolute disaster. Worst session ever for Mercedes as things stand. Hamilton had a time on the board. It was deleted, but it wouldn't have been any better anyway. It would have put him ahead of Bottas, who's got nothing on the board at all, like Lewis Hamilton now, but they'd be 19th and 18th still. So disaster start for Mercedes. Everyone queuing up, 1 minute 40 seconds left, and I can see full wet tyres still.
Yeah, it's a lot more rain.
This heavier rain is expected to last for 2 more minutes, and then it will reduce back to class 1 or class 2.
Okay, that's the weather radar according to McLaren then. So heavy rain for a couple more minutes and then reducing back to a lighter form of rain, depending on where McLaren have their class 1 and 2 rainfall indicators.
And imagine the pressure on this. The rain is coming down. Norris is sitting 10th. Piastri is sitting 13th. This was the dominant team of the weekend so far, but McLaren are not out of the woods in this session either. If the likes of the Mercedes, if an Alex Albon can find a bit of pace, they are still under pressure. So Norris cannot switch off in this session. And once again, there's the threat that any time the grid could be set on this weekend. If the rain doesn't look like it's going to abate, the track conditions are not good enough, Yuki Tsunoda currently would be hoping that's the case, because he'd have pole position.
Yeah, so I mean, just to explain the jeopardy, so heavier rain, obviously that means the track's going to be slower when they head out onto it, which you'd expect that to be the case anyway. So that's 1 to 2 minutes, Will Joseph was saying. Well, there's only 8 minutes 50 seconds left. It's probably 2 minutes to do a warm-up lap. Will it actually do what the forecast says? Charles Leclerc, by the way, he's kept that lap time, so he's still classified in second place as the last 20 seconds before they head out onto the track countdown.
And Oliver Behrman is just pulling up to the inside and being wheeled back in his Haas.
He's on intermediates, so he wants to change tyres now. He's been sitting there. It was a brave move for Behrman, I have to say, to go for Inters. He's 15th and he needs to improve, but he went for Inters and he's just sitting there getting soaked, and he's thinking, no way, Jose, get me back in. I want to put some full wets. And I have to say, looking at the track as it goes green once again, 8.5 minutes left on the clock, I would be surprised if there's anything in this for Mercedes, because the track looks certainly wetter than it did at the start of the session.
Now, the timing screens have not been that reliable on tyre choices this weekend, to be honest with you, but they are indicating at the moment that Valtteri Bottas does have Inters on.
He did put Inters on, but just before the red flag came out, so I wonder if that's just carryover from when we last went green. So we're going to go back out on track, so we should see exactly what everyone has got. But there was talk just before the red flag, even Russell on the radio mentioning the possibility of intermediates. That seems now to have been wiped out as they now do head out on track. 8 minutes to go then in this first part of qualifying. The rain has intensified, expected to lessen in the next couple of minutes, but will it? This track, so easily can the weather conditions change. Undulations, it's tight and twisty in the middle sector, and right now it's Yuki Tsunoda who is sitting pretty at the top. Max Verstappen is in 7th, Lando Norris is down in 10th, and at the bottom George Russell is 18th, Lewis Hamilton is 19th. There is still a lot at stake here in this qualifying session, as the rain is expected to continue throughout the day.
Tell you what, Harry, this would be a cracking grid for a start of a Grand Prix, wouldn't it? Just imagine.
Alonso in 5th, Brilliant stuff. And Ocon third, who was quick straight out the bat in his Alpine. Seems to be quite enjoying these wet conditions. And these are the type of conditions where we can see a little bit of an upset orders. So crucial to keep things neat and tidy. Indeed, George Russell knows the importance of this session as he comes out of the pit lane, overtakes 2 cars around the outside.
Yeah, almost put me in the wall.
Tried a third, and on the RB, didn't quite work on that occasion. Russell, keen to get out, find himself some space, didn't want to sit and wait behind cars.
Well, he's in a hurry. He's 18th at the moment. Bottas is now 20th, and he had his only remaining time wiped off. So the Mercedes are 18th and 19th. And the track looks really, really sodden right now. So it's going to take a couple of laps for anything to dry as Oscar Piastri stamps on the gas, or I should say squeezes on the gas in these conditions and heads into an absolute spray haze coming up the start-finish straight.
You can just about see the fluorescent papaya orange of the McLaren as it breaks downhill into the left-hander for the first part of the Senna S's. Now arcs his way through the left-hander of 3. That's where we lost Colapinto a few moments ago. He was the reason for the red flag in his Williams, losing the car, spinning off into the barrier. He is now out of this session. Piastri hurtles down towards the left-hander of turn 4.
There is some meat on the bone here for the drivers. There is something out there for them to take. Piastri does a personal best in the first sector, so even though the track looks wetter, people are putting in improved sectors. Lando Norris does his best middle sector, and he should be about to come through and improve his time. Currently from 10th, Piastri 13th. Gasly jumps up to 9th and deposes Norris out of the top 10 now. But remember, these conditions are so treacherous. It's one thing trying to improve in them. Another thing, you don't want to put it in the wall if you're a front-running contender. Norris comes through, and he's only 11th still.
And track is still fast. People matching their lap times and will get faster.
That is Brian Botzi talking to Charles Leclerc from the pit wall. So expecting lap times then to be matched and still to increase. Indeed, some people finding time. Ocon finding time on that last lap around, stays in third though, but managed to go a 10th up on his last lap time. 5 minutes to go then. Verstappen sits 7th, Norris is 11th, and we have big hitters currently at risk of being eliminated. The 2 Mercedes being 2 of them. Piastri in the McLaren, who started the sprint yesterday from pole position, just crosses the line, goes 5th fastest, 9/10 adrift of Yuki Tsunoda, who currently has the fastest lap time.
Hamilton is on a better lap. He's on a lap, which is going to be better than anything he's done so far, and now he can get on the gas in the Mercedes, following the Aston Martin of, look like Lance Stroll. Fernando Alonso is about to start his flying lap, in fact, and Hamilton is just following him over the line, but he does enough to get out of the bottom 5 for now. It's 14th.
Only 14th for Lewis Hamilton, who had an absolutely miserable day yesterday in the sprint. Ended up starting in 11th, falling back and clawing his way back up to 11th. Alex Albon crosses the line in the 1 remaining Williams, puts himself up into 7th, behind Alonso, still 1.2 seconds adrift.
Okay, Norris is 13th, and he's not on a flying lap right now. He is coming under pressure. He's just starting a flying lap as I'm speaking, as George Russell's tried to start one and went off at turn 1 with a front locker. So major hitters are still in some trouble, and Lando Norris has got a heap of pressure on him now on the last 1 or possibly 2 laps he's going to get.
I'll tell you what as well, George Russell had a big bump as he came back onto the track there between turns 2 and 3. The car jumped up in the air. I wonder if that's damaged his floor a bit.
3.5 minutes left then of this first part of qualifying as the rain continues to come down in Sao Paulo, and George Russell currently sits plumb last in his Mercedes, but he's on a better lap this time around, makes his way through the right-hander of turn 8. Lewis Hamilton is only marginal to his teammate, up into 15th. Norris sits 13th and will begin a lap now, or is on a lap at the moment, but still needs to find more time. Sainz crosses the line, improves his lap time, but doesn't jump up position, stays in 10th. Has the track suddenly stopped increasing? Has that quickness from the track that we heard Charles Leclerc's engineer describe was still there gone?
Russell's got pace. He's currently last, 20th position, but he is about to leap up the order, so there's still something in the track. I wonder if the tyres are now going away, these full wets, if anything's happened with them. Norris is not going quickly at all on this lap. 2.5 minutes left. Russell comes through and leaps up to 2nd place. There's still still something in it, and Norris is 14th. Hamilton drops to 16th.
Russell getting a lovely tow right off the back of Lance Stroll's Aston Martin as he crosses the line to go second fastest, half a second off Tsunoda. That puts Hamilton down into 16th. Bottas is behind him. Then it's Lawson, Behrman and Joe, all at risk of being eliminated. Hulkenberg's right on the bubble. Verstappen crosses the line and puts the Red Bull up into 5th. Lando Norris now slips down to 14th as he starts another lap. Norris needs to put in a good lap time here with 2 minutes on the board and very much his title chances on the line.
There is plenty still to play for. We are seeing times tumble. Ocon now gets up to second. This is the sound of Nico Hulkenberg coming into the final corner and having that front lock-up that we saw earlier on from Lawson and Joe, and he slithered onto the grass. Norris is struggling a lot. He starts another flying lap and it's another bang average first sector. Hamilton's improving from 17th now, and Lando Norris, with 1.5 minutes left on the clock, is currently doing enough, but he is on the precipice of disaster. And Verstappen's lost his time, I think.
Yeah,
and he's dropped to 12th.
Verstappen, down to 12th. Norris is on another lap. He just had to work his way through 4 cars of traffic, though, so that might have hindered him as he comes into the middle sector. He's just got past Lawson. Hamilton crosses the line, and it's only 17th fastest.
No improvement for Lewis Hamilton. 1 minute left on the clock, and he starts his final flying lap. He's one of the drivers that we thought these conditions would really suit, and he thought these conditions would really suit. But right now, he has 1 lap to save himself, and this is the sound of the Mercedes heading down towards turn 4.
And we almost lose him into the spray, and then we see the sounds of the onboard of Lewis Hamilton into the left-hander of turn 4. Has to have a correction on the steering wheel. The McLaren gets out of the way nicely as he makes his way now towards the right-hander. Just 30 seconds on the clock. Hamilton needs to make this lap count.
Norris does not improve again. He's half a tenth away, and he starts his final flying lap. If 2 drivers behind find time, Lando Norris could go out in Q1.
Verstappen also only just 12th fastest too after having his lap time deleted for track limits. A reminder, Max Verstappen will have a 5-place grid penalty once we set the grid. Verstappen is not going to improve, I don't think. I think Verstappen's going to have to stay where he is. Or did he get across the line?
Bottas goes 13th. Norris is now 15th, and he is struggling. This could be an absolute disaster for Lando Norris. Verstappen should have done enough in 12th position. Hamilton squeezes on the gas. He's fighting the car. He's oversteering all the way up the hill. It's all or nothing for Lewis Hamilton, which would make it all or nothing for Lando Norris.
The clock has counted down to 0. The checkered flag is out. Hamilton across the line. Can he get through? He can. It's only 14th though. Norris slots down into 16th. Lando Norris needs to make this one count here. He's coming into the middle sector now, towards the end of the middle sector, round the right-hander of turn 10. Squeezes on the throttle to try and get that bit of traction. He's got a couple of cars in front of him. Here's Hamilton's radio.
Damn car, man.
That's what Hamilton has to say about his car. Through the left-hander of Jung Sao. Albon goes to the top of the times in the Williams. Norris in 16th, slotted down to 17th, up through the hill, through the double left-hander, out of the spray, comes the Papaya McLaren. Will he get knocked out, or can he make it through? Lando Norris, by a whisker, makes it through into 14th, but straight away, he's put down into 15th, because Liam Lawson in the RB slots up into P14. This is the sound of Max Verstappen. Had his lap time deleted, fell down to 12th. Good first sector, not much to write home about in the middle. To the line for the Dutchman. Can he improve his lap time? He certainly can. By half a second, goes to the top of the times. But by a whisker, I think Norris holds on.
He does. Hamilton is gone then. 16th. Hamilton is the Brit that leaves in Q1. Alongside Oliver Behrman is another. Colapinto stayed 18th, even though he didn't do the second half of the session. Hulkenberg 19th, and Joe was the last car that could have knocked Norris out and didn't. So by the skin of his teeth, Lando Norris stays in qualifying, but he's got no pace at the moment.
Out of Q1, Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes 16th, Ollie Behrman 17th.
And we are through.
That was Lando Norris being told he is through. He ended up 15th ahead of Hamilton, who was out. Behrman 17th. Colapinto, who crashed out in the first part or in the early stages of Q1, managed to finish 18th ahead of Hulkenberg and Joe.
Right. Yeah, we just take it through it.
in these conditions, so much is about getting your tyres into the right working window and feeling confidence, gaining some confidence to use the tyre more, which gets them back into the window, and it's sort of self-perpetuating. And I just think Norris and Hamilton, two drivers that usually thrive in these sort of conditions, never felt the grip. We rode on board with Hamilton coming out of the final corner, and he was turning right more than he was turning left for the left-handers up the hill. He was just fighting wheel spin and oversteer all the way up. He didn't have the grip, and that, I think, is a very confused seven-time champ.
Okay, that was P1 in the end.
Lovely.
He made us wait for it, and it was only Q1, but Verstappen did go to the top of the times in the end. It was Albon behind him with Russell, Ocon and Tsunoda, the top 5. But indeed, Lewis Hamilton, who has just been called to the weighbridge and then now moved forward into his Mercedes pit box and now getting wheeled back into his garage out in Q1 for the 3rd time this year, 2nd time in the last 3 races.
Great job from Valtteri Bottas in the Sauber, up into 13th, and it was the likes of him that really added the pressure to some of the big names. Colapinto crashing probably took out a car that could have been quite quick as well, because Albon was up in 2nd in the Williams. There's some major giant kills in Q1 there. Ocon and Gasly 4th and 6th, Tsunoda in 5th. Here's Hamilton.
The car was on drive.
Yeah, just never feeling the love from the tyres, struggling, and what a miserable weekend for Lewis. Out in SQ2 on Friday, a really mediocre drive in the sprint, not really able to make any progress. Getting a replay of him heading down towards turn 4, hitting the brakes, trying to stay on the drier grooves, and just washing wide and off the track, fighting the rear of the car. I don't think that was on his best lap, and no, he backs off that one. So that's just, again, an indicator of how much he was fighting the rear of the car. But Bottas, 1.6 seconds ahead of his teammate in the Saubers.
And that was the end of a rather frantic Q1. I tell you what, if Franco Colapinto had been able to even match the pace of Alex Albon going out in the second half, well, Lando Norris might well have found himself out in Q1, only just making it through in that final lap time. But Norris, that's a bit of a worry for McLaren now, heading into Q2, which will start in a couple of minutes.
So the question is it a lack of pace and a lack of confidence and something not clicking with Norris today with championship pressures on the line, or is it a one set of wet tyres that's just not giving him grip, not in the right window, and he was struggling on that? He'll put on a new set now, and will that give him a little bit of love back, or is he going to carry on fighting? Because with the pace that he had, he's got no chance of a top 10. He was a full 0.8 of a second away from Fernando Alonso in the top 10 there. He's got a huge amount to find, and he was pushing. He was under pressure every lap, but just never looked like improving. And on the final tour, just found a few tenths to save his skin for the moment. But mighty amount of pressure is now being placed on Lando Norris, not least because at the end of that, he'll see Max Verstappen half a second clear at the top.
And that's that lap time from Norris, 0.8 slower than his teammate Oscar Piastri, who finished Q1 in 9th. Just over a minute then until we get Q2 underway. We lost the 2 Haas cars as well in Q1, but Ollie Behrman, who is substituting for Kevin Magnussen this weekend, Magnussen feeling unwell from Friday onwards, so we've had Behrman for the full weekend, out qualifying his teammate Nico Hülkenberg, which is no mean feat. We know how well Hülkenberg goes in qualifying, but not the result they would have wanted. Both cars out in Q1, and they are embroiled in quite a tight fight for 6th in the constructors. So both RB cars going through, their closest rivals, is not good news for the Haas team.
Yeah, good individual effort from Behrman, being ahead of Hülkenberg, again, doing a great job as a rookie driver. But for their team, as you said, Tsunoda's looking quick in the RB. Lawson has a turn of pace as well and is still in contention here. So these are the days and the weekends where you could have a big swing in points. And also I'm looking at Alpine, who have got 2 cars sitting in the top 6 of Q1 there. We're expecting wet weather conditions later on. It's pretty much set in for the day. So if you're quick in qualifying, you can be quick in the race.
So the rain does look like it's eased off now, so potentially the best conditions will be now at the start.
Okay, so that's the latest on the wet weather conditions from Alex Albon's radio as he's queued up with Valtteri Bottas in the Sauber just edging out in front of him in the pit lane. Full wet tyres on board, though, to begin with.
So the next question is, will anyone go for intermediates in Q2? If you can put on an intermediate tyre, they've got the green stripe on the outside, you can find a load of time if the tyre works. It doesn't cut as much water off the track. It doesn't disperse as much, but because of that, it's got more tyre in contact with the track, and it will give you more grip if it works. If it doesn't work, you're going to be skating off into the barriers. That's the risk.
Green light on at the end, and 15 minutes already underway, down to 40 minutes and 24 seconds. We've talked a lot, Jolien, already as the cars come out for their first out laps from the pit lane. We talked a lot about how some drivers can really come alive in these conditions. But why is that? Why do some just perform so much better in the wet or have an affinity with these kind of conditions?
Well, they say it's the great equaliser, really, the wet conditions of car performance. In reality, it doesn't always work like that, because the best cars are the best cars because they have the most downforce, and that really helps them in the wet as well. But driver skill and an innate feel for grip is so important in these conditions. Just being able to slide the car around is less about the science and more about your gut feel and your instincts as a driver. And so it can make up for a bit of car performance, as we are looking at Oscar Piastri heading out of the pits on an intermediate tyre. So Piastri is the first to go on an inter.
Gut feeling for Piastri to go on that intermediate tyre. Everybody else has gone out on the full wet tyre.
They'll all want to be on the inter because it's a much faster tyre. The only question is, can it cope with the level of standing water?
That is the question, as Carlos Sainz plunges downhill through the centre S, is still kicking up a fair amount of spray through the left-hander of turn 3. Has a little bit of a wiggle on the front end of that Ferrari as he heads down the Retta Apposta towards turn 4. Have an Alpine in front of him, of Pierre Gasly, right on the racing line coming through the corner, but should get out of the way for Sainz. Indeed he does, as Sainz hurtles round the outside of Gasly through the exit of 4.
Traffic in these conditions is so difficult to judge as well. You don't see anything behind you with the spray being kicked up, so it's all about communication on the radio, and there will still be impeding penalties in place for this, even though it's treacherous wet conditions. So something for everyone still to think about. 12 minutes left on the clock in Q2. The intermediate tyre is a good tyre. It has a very wide range of operating, and that is why Piastri has gone for it so early, to try and get a head start on that tyre, and also to probably provide some learnings for Norris, who wasn't very happy on the full wet. Sainz is really struggling through Magulio, left-hander over the crest, feathering out of the throttle. I love the speedway action of the drivers, the amount of times they're opposite locking the whole way through corners. The skill level right now is top tier.
Driver skill absolutely tested to the max. This is the sound of Sainz powering himself over the line for the first lap time in Q2. It's a 1:29.406. Charles Leclerc behind him, though, now arcs his way through the double left-handers that see off a lap. Leclerc looking a little quicker than Carlos Sainz. Let's see what the time is when he comes across the line. Indeed, about a tenth quicker, 1:29.3 from the Monegasque. So the opening gambits from Ferraris see Leclerc ahead of Sainz, but let's see what an intermediate tyre can do in these conditions. The sound of Oscar Piastri is what you're hearing, hurtling down to turn 4.
Tentative on the throttle through 3. That's where Colapinto found the wall in our only crash so far, and he's cautious on the brakes as well for turn 4. But as the temperature builds and his confidence grows, that tyre will get better and better, and he's not a million miles off through the first sector, which consists basically of straight lines, and the Senna S fighting a little snap coming through Ferradura, turn 6 and 7, the double right-hander that takes you over the crest. Then you drop down after turn 8 into the long left-hander at the bottom of the hill, and that's where he's fishtailing, fighting the car now as the water collects down there in the probably the lowest part of the circuit.
Perez has just gone to the top of the times as well by half a second from Alonso. 1:28.1 from Perez, who was out on a good lap at the moment. Well, Piastri's first sector with about 7/10 adrift of Perez's fastest first sector. After the middle sector, Piastri's about 9/10 down on the fastest lap time. His teammate Lando Norris has just slotted up into 8th. Verstappen, who was out there on the full wet tyre, is fastest of anybody in the middle sector. Piastri crosses the line though and finds a big chunk of time and heads all the way up to 3rd on that intermediate tyre. He is though 7/10 down on Perez.
But that shows the intermediate is good, and Lando Norris is immediately called to pit for inters, and everyone else now will do the same. Piastri's been the guinea pig. He has performance in that tyre, and that shows that is the best tyre to be on, particularly if we're not expecting more intense rain immediately. everyone has to pit.
Yeah, first lap time from Piastri, now down to fourth as Verstappen goes fastest, but crucially Piastri on that intermediate tyre, it'll only get quicker from there. Ocon's out on a lap at the moment on the wet tyre, but you wonder if Alpine will wait around and just call him straight in. Piastri's back out onto another flyer, fastest of anybody through the first sector, as indeed Bottas pits, Stroll pits, Russell's on an outlap now, Lawson's come into the pits as well. Tsunoda has just come back out onto the track on the intermediate tyre too. So that transition happening now. It is still wet on the track, but now crucially it seems that the conditions are good enough for that intermediate tyre.
9 minutes left on the clock and plenty of time for everyone to pit and get back out there and do some flying laps. It's a short lap, it's a 1 minute 27 in these conditions even for Max Verstappen at the top of the times, but he won't be at the top of the times for long. This is Oscar Piastri heading now past the pit entry on the left hand side. He stays on the circuit unlike the rest of the field, and he goes clear by 6/10.
Yeah, the biggest indicator yet. Perez has come into the pits as well to change on to intermediate tyres. Lando Norris peels away from his McLaren pit box now with a fresh set of intermediate tyres. That transition happening now, so the lap times will only increase. 8.5 minutes remaining. Yuki Tsunoda out on track is now just struggling a little bit to plant the throttle in his RB as he makes his way downhill through the left-hander that approaches Zhou.
So Norris has pitched for Inters, Harry and Jolyon, but he wasn't comfortable still on that wet tyre. 10th place he is at the moment. You know, you've got Verstappen, Perez, Alonso, Bottas, Stroll, Leclerc and Russell and Sainz all faster than him on the wet tyre. Can he do something different on the Inters? Find that feeling.
I wonder if McLaren just don't have pace in these conditions. Remember Spa in the wet qualifying? We thought it was going to be a McLaren Red Bull march out front, and actually in the wet, as you hear a replay of George Russell having a spin on an outlap out of turn 9, the low-speed right-hander. At Spa, McLaren never found the love in the damp conditions. They were struggling for grip and they ended up 4th and 5th on the grid, and it opened the door for a Lewis Hamilton win and a Mercedes great opportunity when they didn't have the pace in normal situations. Charles Leclerc was quick on that day in the Ferrari as well. Verstappen was rapid, topped the times, but had the engine penalty as he has today as well. I wonder if the McLaren car is not fantastic at the moment in the slippery conditions. Piastri is not really showing that at the moment. He's top of the times by 2 seconds because he's got those intermediates on early and he's taken the massive gain out of it, and he was solid in Q1, but he wasn't spectacular, and we've seen Oscar Piastri be spectacular in the wet before as well.
Certainly have done. A reminder, we're in Q2. We will eliminate the slowest 5 drivers come the end of the next 6 minutes and 47 seconds at the moment. That looks like Gasly, Lawson, Albon, Ocon and Tsunoda. But now on the intermediate tyres, crucially, for pretty much everybody out there indeed. Yes, they are now all on the intermediates. We will see the order change. George Russell makes his way through the right-hander of turn 10, where he had the spin on his outlap just a couple of minutes ago. This time though, tentatively onto the brakes through the left-hander of Zhou. He's got a bit of traffic in front of him in the form of the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc as he applies the throttle uphill though. The Mercedes rear end kicks out, has to have a correction on the steering wheel through the double left-handers that see off the lap of Sao Paulo. He'll get a little bit of slipstream from the Ferrari in front and pops up to second in his Mercedes, a 1:26.3, but we've got a yellow flag out. I think it's Carlos Sainz, it is, and he's found the wall, has Sainz, and the rear wing of that car is off. He's side on into the wall, and that is a red flag out straight away. It's coming through the Senna S's. Is it the same place as Colapinto? No, it's not. He's saying he's okay, and Sainz is actually facing backwards.
Yeah, that's the second part of it, isn't it, for Sainz? So the corner before Colapinto, he was in 10th place, was just starting a flying lap on an intermediate and has had a heftier crash backing into the wall at turn 2. Lando Norris is 11th now. Liam Lawson just before the red flag flew with up to 5th place in the RB. Norris hasn't done a time on the intermediates, and with the clock stopped, he's going to be under big pressure once again when this gets going. This is Carlos Sainz safely through 1. Oh, he's just spiked some wheel spin trying to get on the gas between 1 and 2, and that's enough to send him dancing into a spin.
Alright, crash. Sorry, guys.
And that was the sound of Sainz on the radio. He is fine, and now the marshals have made their way over to the stricken Ferrari, which is still in the wall. The tractor straight over as Carlos Sainz takes his headrest out and begins to get out of his Ferrari.
Now that's quite badly damaged, that car. It's embedded in the barrier quite heavily. The right rear corner is completely broken. That might be a gearbox and drive shaft issue as well, Jolien. Who knows whether the engine might be damaged as well. That's a lot more work for Ferrari than Williams have got on Colapinto's car.
Anytime you back it in, you're at the sensitive parts of the car area. Power unit, engine, gearbox. So Sainz there under pressure. I still think Ferrari will repair that. They've got, so long as Leclerc doesn't also do something, they'll have the whole crew to fix that car, and it's so important for them to do that. But for Ferrari and their championship bid, that is not only a physical hit, but a metaphorical hit as well. They need to haul in McLaren with some points. Norris is under big pressure, but Sainz is not going to be starting at the sharp end of this Grand Prix.
Albon, Tsunoda, Ocon all didn't quite manage to finish their lap times in the end. That might have seen them bump up the order. And as you said a little earlier, Jolien, Lando Norris, who is chasing down Max Verstappen in the championship. So far the advantage has been with Norris through the sprint race, managing to claw some points back. But in this qualifying session so far, in these conditions, Norris in that McLaren just looks a little bit on edge.
Massively on edge. He was so close to doing the Carlos Sainz crash before Carlos got to turn 2 there. Had exactly the same moment on the same tyre, starting a flying lap on an intermediate, and just was hanging on to the car through turns 2 and then 3. He's got no confidence at the moment, Norris. There's clearly huge pressure on his shoulders on a day like this. A dry day, and we know McLaren have the pace, but when you have these wet conditions, anything can happen. What always happens is Verstappen is so fast. He is relentlessly strong in all conditions, but particularly in the wet, and it's happening again. And Norris is feeling the pressure. He did, however, do well to not crash the car and save it from the barriers, and wait for Carlos Sainz to have that moment, which seemed inevitable for someone. So with 5 minutes 51 seconds left on the clock, he has another chance to get out and improve. But he is just still under immense pressure at all times in this qualifying hour.
And the radar, which we've just seen a shot of, seems to be showing a dry patch coming over the circuit for a while, or at least a less rainy patch. So it may be once they get this session back underway, the conditions progressively improve. We'll have to see.
Well, as the Ferrari gets taken out of the barrier and gets jacked up by the cinch that is being deployed by the tractor, we have the clock stopped at 5 minutes and 51 seconds. The red flag is out. Piastri has the fastest lap time ahead of Russell, Stroll, Verstappen, Lawson in the top 5 ahead of Perez. Then comes Bottas in 7th, Alonso 8th with the 2 Ferraris, Leclerc 9th, Sainz 10th, and now no longer in qualifying. In that drop zone though, Lando Norris in 11th ahead of Pierre Gasly's Alpine 12th, Alex Albon 13th, Yuki Tsunoda 14th, and Esteban Ocon, who hasn't got a lap time on the board yet in his Alpine, down in 15th spot. So Sainz walks away, helmet off, and rather slowly makes his way back to the paddock. A little wave to the grandstand as well.
So we are guaranteed some level of mixed up grid for tomorrow. We've got a Mercedes for tomorrow, for later on today. We've got a Mercedes in 16th, Lewis Hamilton out. Carlos Sainz is unlikely to be making it through into Q3 because with 5 minutes 51 seconds left, someone should improve and knock him out if he doesn't need to make bigger changes, and that'll be a pit lane start for Sainz. So you've already got that. You've got Verstappen with a 5-place grid penalty hanging over him, so he won't be starting from the front whatever happens. And you've got Lando Norris still desperately struggling for grip and even a place in Q3.
I tell you what as well, we're looking now already at a delay to the race start time, because there's just under 6 minutes of this session left, then a 5-minute break before Q3, then 12 minutes of Q3. We're already beyond 8:30 in the UK. Once you add those things together, which means 4 hours to the start of the race, it can't start at 2:30 anymore. We'll just have to wait and see what that is. I just want to make the point about cars, Jolien, and confidence, and why some drivers might be struggling and some drivers might not, and why performance parameters might not be the same in wet and dry. These cars run at an optimum ride height, and some of them are more sensitive to that ride height than others. And what's very noticeable in the wet, here's Perez's radio.
We should have stayed in the garage. We are more or less the last car.
It's going to improve through the session here.
He's just having a bit of a moan there, Perez, about his positioning in the queue, I think, as we count down to 1 minute 45 seconds to go to the start of the session. So the cars are running much higher in the wet. It's very obvious, and some cars lose a greater proportion of their total downforce as the ride height goes up. So it may be that the McLaren is that car, that it has a window that it works in, and the Red Bull perhaps has a wider window and it keeps more of its downforce at a higher ride height.
We're also in the rare position where teams have changed their cars for wet conditions because, let's hear from Piastri.
So, Oscar, there's now light drops in pit lane. We think the rain may pick up in 4 minutes or so.
Okay, so it could be a one-lap wonder then for everyone out there, and Norris is at the front of the field. Usually, when you have a wet qualifying, you think it could be a dry race, so you cannot compromise the setup of your car for a wet qualifying, because if it's then dry in the race, I'm talking mainly cranking on a load of downforce, adding rear wing, front wing flap to compensate. Then once you do that, you could be a sitting duck in the Grand Prix. But because it's all happening on one day, and we know the forecast, having had it for 18 hours already, we know that it's pretty much set in. It's very unlikely that we're going to get any slick running in the race. Everyone now can just whack on loads of downforce, and so the cars are in a completely different configuration, not only with ride height but downforce levels as well. And again, that's another area where McLaren obviously had a good lower downforce setting, which you'd want him at this circuit in the dry conditions for the long straight. You don't want it so much in the wet. You need the downforce to get the tyres working and to get the speed through the corners when it's wet.
Well, the rain then still coming down, expected to get worse perhaps in the next few minutes, but the green light is back on at the end of the pit lane and Q2 is back underway. This the sound of Lando Norris in the McLaren, who is currently sitting in 11th, but crucially first car out onto the track, lined right up at the start of the field as he heads onto the circuit.
So this is a nice position for Norris to be in. 11th is pressure, but at least he has a clear circuit ahead of him. He goes out on a new set of intermediate tyres, and he now has his destiny in his hands by being the first car onto the track. Just over 5 minutes left of the session, but it's nice when you can just see where you're going on an outlap. You can see where the puddles are, you can feel the grip at your leisure rather than worrying about your track positioning and trying to find your way through the spray. So McLaren actually throughout the whole of this qualifying have done well getting Norris to the front of the queue, and he's got the best chance of anyone to try and improve.
Tsunoda is the second car out on track, then Albon, Lawson and Piastri, the other McLaren, then a few cars back from his teammate. Then there's a big gap to Alonso, who's got a nice bit of clear circuit in front of him. Charles Leclerc elected to wait while everybody else went out on the pit lane as soon as the green light went green. Leclerc being let out of his garage to join the circuit, but then there comes a little bit of a gaggle in the midfield pack. Perez, Stroll, Gasly all dicing to try and get a bit of position on this outlap.
And actually Norris is just starting a flying lap now, 4 minutes and 18 seconds left on the clock, and he's probably going to catch some of these drivers later on his flying lap. This is the sound on board. The man sitting second in the Drivers' Championship, coming through turns 1 and 2, taking a little bit of curve now, trying to open up the corner, but there's always a bit of risk of sliding on the painted surface, and he's cleanly through the first couple of corners, if a little tentative.
Onto the brakes for Lando Norris, 2 tenths up on a time to get himself into the top 10, but that was Carlos Sainz's fastest first sector. He is currently now out of qualifying, having crashed, and Norris through the exit of 5 with a bit of a wobble on his McLaren, pushing hard. Lando Norris really trying to get that lap time in the bag. He currently sits in 11th. This is crucial for the man who does indeed sit second in the World Championship.
But the times are going to tumble so much now. The track has not got wetter whilst we've been under red flag, and most of the field hadn't put intermediate tyres on when the red flag came out, so they're about to find the new hit of grip that Oscar Piastri found at the start of the session. So it's one thing improving to take yourself into the top 10, you've got to improve to beat everyone else as well, and Norris on this lap is about to leap up the order finally.
He is, but his first sector time has already been beaten by Fernando Alonso, Yuki Tsunoda and somebody else I noticed, Valtteri Bottas, so he's not that quick. Here he comes across the line.
Here he comes indeed, across the line for Lando Norris. Puts himself up into third. His teammate is still fastest with a 1:25.1. Norris 1.2 seconds off his teammate Piastri. But as Andrew alluded to, cars are going quicker behind. As Tsunoda in the RB pops up just behind Norris into fourth. That puts Leclerc and Sainz now down into that elimination zone. No more Sainz throughout this session. He will be knocked out.
So Sainz is 13th and he should end up 15th and last in this stretch. Charles Leclerc is now 12th. Fernando Alonso is 11th. Even Max Verstappen is 7th and Perez 9th, with everyone improving on intermediate. So there's no time for anyone to rest on their laurels. Alonso, as you said, jumps up to the top of the times. Charles Leclerc is a man now in 12th in the Ferrari, needing to find something. He's had a very ordinary first sector.
Sliding out of turn 9 was Charles Leclerc as he makes it through the right-hander of turn 10, then curves round to the left through 11, now approaching Jung Sao. A touch on the brakes, 2 minutes to go. Stroll gets up to fourth, Ocon up to third. That puts Norris down to 6th place. Verstappen is only 10th.
And he's not on a flying lap. Now the pressure goes on to Max Verstappen. 1 minute 43 seconds left on the clock. He's got time for 2 flying laps as he starts one right now, but he's 10th and on the bubble. 11th now for Verstappen.
Leclerc up to third, yellow flag in sector 1. Will that elevate to anything more? It's still out, so nobody will be able to improve. Coming through the first sector, Lando Norris comes across the line, fastest of anybody in the final sector, goes to the top of the times, a 1:24.8.
If that yellow goes to red, then Verstappen is going to be out, unable to improve. He's halfway around the lap, and he's not on a flying lap anyway in the first sector. Max Verstappen is 11th. Albon jumps up to 4th. Verstappen is 11th. Perez is 13th, and we're still under yellow.
Verstappen, as a reminder, will have a 5-place grid penalty on top of wherever he qualifies. He's now down to 12th. The yellow flag is still out. It's for Lance Stroll, who is still not moving. He is now moving slowly, so perhaps that yellow will go out now, but Max Verstappen is not going quick enough. It's a red flag for this Q2 session. Verstappen will not progress through with 46 seconds left of Q2. Verstappen down in 12th. That'll be +5 once he gets the grid penalty for this afternoon's Grand Prix. Verstappen with big issues then on Sunday, out because Lance Stroll found the wall.
That is huge. This is the sound of Lance Stroll trying to get his car going, but he's in a really dangerous spot. He switched the engine off. He's also backed it into the wall, and the rear is crabbing. He's hit that hard, and the red flag is completely understandable. I think the race director was obviously waiting to see if he would get going again, but there's no chance for him to do so, and this is going to be the sound of him coming through turns 1, past the Sainz corner at turn 2, and he's going to do the Colapinto, isn't he? Gets wide at 3, backs it into the wall. It is exactly the same as Colapinto. Front whack, rear whack. Tried to get it going, but no chance with that damage. And Harry, the moments here could be title defining. Lando Norris got himself to the top of the times at the right time. Max Verstappen missed a lap. I'm not sure why, if it was traffic or a mistake, but that means he is out and he will start 17th for the Grand Prix.
Talk about a turnaround in one qualifying session as well. Lando Norris managing to get to the top of the times. Q2 will not be resumed. Both Red Bulls out. Bottas 11th, Verstappen 12th, Perez 13th, Sainz 14th, who crashed earlier on in this session, and Pierre Gasly 15th. Those are the eliminated drivers out of Q2. 12th for Max Verstappen, as you say, with the 5-place grid penalty. This is exactly what McLaren and Lando Norris needed today.
And Charles Leclerc just dragged himself out of that bottom 5 right towards the end of it as well, only by 0.4 of a second. So you've still got a Ferrari in pole contention, 2 McLarens, but George Russell, who's been average in this qualifying so far, no Red Bulls, no Sainz, no Hamilton, and Verstappen marches out the car furious. It's plain bad luck, really, for Verstappen to be where he was at the time when he that's the replay of the sound of the Red Bull, seeing the red flag coming out and realise his fate is sealed. Now, I said before, Norris was in the best position to get a lap in. McLaren sent him to the front of the queue. He waited there a long time, and they kept doing that. Red Bull didn't. That is exactly why McLaren sent Norris to the front. He had the best chance, and he executed the best lap to go top. Red Bull left Verstappen back. That meant he had one less lap. He didn't do a good lap on his one opportunity. I don't know why yet. But that's the pressures, and Red Bull, I think, have made an error not preempting that situation and getting Max, their title leader at the moment, to the front of the queue.
We heard Perez complaining about his position in the queue as well on the radio even before we got Q2 back underway as Lance Stroll's car gets removed, should say Stroll out of the car now and walking away, so he's okay. The car, not so much.
And Stroll made it through into Q3, so there are only going to be 9 cars fighting it out for pole position.
And here we are, wet weather, a car that qualified at the back of the grid pretty much yesterday. Fernando Alonso's 43 years old and he's second fastest in qualifying so far, sandwiched between the two McLarens.
The wily old fox has still got it, hasn't he, in these conditions?
So shall I tell you who's in this Q3 then?
Please do.
We've got the two McLarens who have been the benchmark so far this weekend, but Norris has been huffing and puffing to just get to this position, and finally he found a turn of pace on one lap that has saved his bacon. Piastri's looked a bit more assured. The two McLarens are in. Alonso has been a star in these conditions. That doesn't really surprise anyone. Who was going to be one of those headline drivers at the start, and when there's these conditions and there's opportunities arising, Fernando Alonso's always there. Charles Leclerc just about scraped through in the other Ferrari. Aside from him, you've got Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda, the two RBs, who have been scrabbling around trying to get any points on the board in recent races. You've got Esteban Ocon in the Alpine, who's been mired at the back in recent races as well. You've got George Russell in the Mercedes, who's got an okay turn of speed compared to those guys, but he's nowhere near the front-running pace of the McLarens and the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc, as we've seen so far this weekend. And you've got Alex Albon in a Williams. You've basically got 3 front-runners, a George Russell in the gap, 4 drivers, and then 5 filler content trying to get something on the board, one of which is Fernando Alonso trying to have some level of heroics on his 401st Grand Prix start.
What a prospect this is going to be for Q3. Here's Perez.
What's the time left on the clock?
45 seconds.
Come on, guys. We got to do a better program.
Unfortunately, with where we are in the pit lane, the whole...
That's not an excuse, mate. No. We should have waited. If everyone is waiting already at the end of the pit lane, why we go?
So Hugh Bird there, Sergio Perez's race engineer, saying, look, where we are in the pit lane, we can't get down there first. Red Bull are the first garage in the pit lane. They're there because it's an advantage to be there. They were champions last year, and overall in the season, they take a small gain by having the first garage. When the drivers pit in a Grand Prix, they have a nice open pit box, and there is an advantage to being there. And that is the prize, or one of the many small prizes of being the champions of the last year. But on a day like this, when you want to go queuing up, it does mean you've got a longer way to travel to get to the end of the pits. And they didn't try with either Perez or Verstappen. Both drivers are fuming. Verstappen hasn't vocalised it on the radio, but he looked fuming, and I imagine he needed to be out there at the front of the queue. Hugh Bird saying, look, where we are in the pits, that's just how it happens. But McLaren are quite far down the pits as well. They were 4th last year in the Constructors' Championship, so they've still managed to leap 6 teams to get down to the front, and Red Bull haven't done that. And that has cost not only Verstappen, but it's cost Perez, who's actually been pretty quick in this qualifying as well and was looking like he could have had a top 5 start. He's devastated, and the team are not going to have either car in the top 10. Yeah. Procedurally, not their best.
No, and questions already being raised then over the radio by Sergio Perez. I'm sure that will continue into the debrief that they'll have in between now and the race getting going a little later on this afternoon. But as we get into this little lull, wait for Q3 underway. As we've said, only 9 cars will take part because Lance Stroll, who didn't make it through, his car crashing, causing the red flag right at the end of Q2 and being damaged. The barrier as well also being damaged, but looks like it should be a fairly speedy repair, not too much done to it.
And no more rain for the moment either, so the track getting better little bit by little bit. Should be intermediates when Q3 gets going. And now the next thing is, it's going to be vital for Norris to get himself to the front of the field, and ideally have Piastri there for McLaren's sake as well. Getting into Q3, in fact it is just starting to drizzle again. Getting into Q3 with Verstappen starting as 17th is good, obviously, it's brilliant for Norris, but if he starts P7, P8, in what will be wet conditions for the Grand Prix later on. That's still so difficult. You'll have a face full of spray. You've got cars around you that are trying to do the race of their seasons everywhere. They'll get their elbows out, and this will not be straightforward for McLaren unless he can get himself to the front of the field, be at least in the top three, and have, again, a little bit more control of his destiny. So Norris, Piastri, Leclerc, the three bona fide front runners right now have to make the position they're in count.
But there is a little bit of pressure off, though, with the fact Max Verstappen knocked out in Q2, down in 12th, will get that 5-place grid penalty, will start the race later on today from 17th position. Just hearing, though, from race control, the start of Q3 will be delayed for those barrier repairs, I presume.
I don't even know if that's necessarily pressure off. I guess it alleviates a little bit, because you know that you've got some places to Verstappen. But the reality of Norris's championship situation is he's 44 points behind Max. He has to win every Grand Prix if he's to be champion, or get extraordinarily lucky and pick up the pieces of something else. Verstappen starts 17th, but he has the skill to come through for some good points in a wet race, and Red Bull generally cool things very well as well on changeable conditions. So there is no resting on laurels, I think, for McLaren here. Norris still knows this is now not an open goal, but it's a one-on-one with the keeper. He's got to score.
Well, some cars are already heading out to the end of the pit lane. The start time of Q3 will be at 8:37 local time, so in a couple of minutes, and we'll on the chat of positioning and how to get to the front. Well, McLaren are pretty much there. They're sitting second and third in the queue behind the Williams of Alex Albon, who got out first and is now just sat there waiting for the green light to come on, which will be in about 2 minutes and 20 seconds as Charles Leclerc and his mechanics look like they are about to get him ready to send him out then. So we will get Q3 underway, expecting most to be, or pretty much everybody to be on those intermediate tyres. We saw that switch coming through the middle of Q2, but of course there is still rain coming down. We're expecting rain all day long in Sao Paulo. The conditions better than they were yesterday, certainly in terms of the visibility, at least on track, but it is very wet indeed, and we've seen some fall by the wayside with small mistakes, particularly coming through the centre S's in the final part through turn 3.
I feel like there's a legend to be born today, heading into Q3. This is the scene of Hülkenberg's 2010 pole in a Williams. It's the scene of Kevin Magnussen in a Haas taking pole 2 years ago. And with the way that we've had the topsy-turvy field, no one looks settled. I feel like someone like maybe Fernando Alonso to roll back the years, but Esteban Ocon has been flying as well in the Alpine. He was right towards the back end of the field in the sprint, has not had a turn of pace, but in these conditions is flying. Someone like an Ocon, could it be a Yuki Tsunoda? One of them's going to qualify at least in the top 3 with how things are unfolding at the moment.
I tell you what as well, just to go back to Red Bull, okay, they got out late and the drivers only got one lap in and that lap wasn't quick enough, but Fernando Alonso only did one flying lap as well and he's second fastest. So it's not just about whether you just get one lap, whether you get 2 laps. Norris did get 2 laps, Alonso did not.
Yeah, but it helps to have 2. So you're right, Verstappen and Perez had the opportunity. We didn't see what happened on their laps. Maybe there was someone went off ahead, maybe they were just plain unlucky, maybe there was a mistake, I don't know. But if you have 2 laps, you have double the chance to get through, and that's what Red Bull didn't give their drivers.
It certainly has. We're just about to get the top 10 shootout underway and the fight for pole position, which will not include Max Verstappen, who, because of a late crash for the Aston Martin of Lance Stroll causing a red flag in Q2, Verstappen couldn't get his lap time in, knocked out in 12th, plus the 5-place grid penalty that he'll get for the race later on. He'll start down in 17th. Norris finished up fastest, so this is very much advantage for the Brit in this title fight. Right then, so the clock is counting down. The green light is on at the end of the pit lane. 9 cars will take to the circuit. They are led out by the Frenchman Esteban Ocon in the Alpine, followed by the 2 McLarens. We heard Piastri on the radio a few moments ago. It was just the words that popped up for us, saying that, well, if it stays like these conditions, we should just stay out. The team agreeing for that. So crucial, I suppose, Jolien, after what we've seen so far in this topsy-turvy, chaotic qualifying, just to be be out on the track, get your lap times in, and then hope you don't meet any kind of yellow or red flag.
Exactly. This is just never the situation to be waiting for a better moment. You always have to be putting the time in and getting yourself to the top spot or as high up the grid as you can. We've just seen that in Q2, haven't we? Verstappen, in theory, had one more flying lap left in him, but caught the red flag, didn't get that in, and that can happen at any moment in these conditions. I have to say the skill level across the field has been brilliant in this qualifying. This is some of the wettest conditions that we've had in Formula 1 for quite a long time. Visibility has been so low. It's better now there's only 9 cars left in, but to have only 3 crashes across Q1 and Q2 has been quite a high bar set by the field so far. Only 9 are left in. They've been the 9 that have coped the best with the conditions, you could argue. So 10.5 minutes left on the clock. Let's see what happens.
And a reminder of who is out on track in this session. Esteban Ocon in the Alpine, the 2 McLarens of Norris and Piastri, the sole remaining Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso, the 2 RBs of Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson, the Williams of Alex Albon, the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc, and the Mercedes of George Russell, all out on track now, all on that intermediate tyre, and it's Esteban Ocon who will set the first lap time on the board.
Fighting the car massively coming through turn 3, where Stroll went off and where Colapinto went off. Turn 2 is where Sainz went off. That's all in the Senna S, which encompasses turns 1, 2 and 3, and the entirety of the first sector. They are the really tricky zones from what we've seen so far. Then it's braking into turn 12 at the end of the lap, where it's easy to lock the inside front as you come over the crest of turn 11, hit the brakes. We've seen some drivers running off there, but the first sector is where the peril is at the moment, and Ocon was fighting the car a lot.
Piastri faster than Ocon through the first sector by about 1/10 of a second. Russell going well too in the middle sector as he makes his way around, but Ocon will be the first out on track. Norris also out there, coming towards the end of the first sector now, in through the middle, following his teammate around. Piastri ahead on the road, but it's Ocon who powers himself up the hill through Zhengsao, round the double left-handers, through the spray, emerges the pink and blue Alpine, and across the line for Esteban Ocon. First lap time on the board, it's a 1:26.267.
Albon well out of it in the middle sector, so he's lost 10 seconds somewhere and has backed off. Here's Oscar Piastri now driving to the line, the first man to get onto those inters in Q2. He's got the most experience on them, and he jumps to the top of the times, but only 1/10 up on Esteban Ocon. Norris now comes through and improves by 4/10.
Norris to the line. Where will that put him? Right to the top, indeed, by 4/10, 1:25.6 for Lando Norris. Piastri, Ocon, Albon, the 4-time set on the board at the moment. This is the sound of George Russell making his way through the slow right-hander of turn 8, then through the arcing left-hander of turn 9, but he has to get out of it through the middle of the corner. Every time he applies the throttle, the car just not wanting to go with him.
Little grip for Russell. He was happier than Hamilton in Q1. Hamilton went out in Q1 fighting the rear of the car all the way, and Russell was much the same on this intermediate on his first flying lap. He's quite quick with it though. He's up on Norris through the second sector as well by 1/10, fighting the car more coming up the hill, splashing through the puddle that remains out of turn 12, and now he wants to get his foot down to the floor and get to the top spot.
Tsunoda and Leclerc both with good laps. Leclerc second, Tsunoda third. Where will this put them though? It puts them down a spot because Russell moves himself up to second spot. 0.5 of a second separating him and Lando Norris, but Esteban Ocon, the man who was enjoying these conditions quite nicely, still with 7.5 minutes left though, goes fastest of anybody by 0.5 second, but Piastri has looked good on this next lap, fastest through the first sector, good middle sector too from Piastri, and it's the fastest final sector we've seen so far to put himself 4/10 clear at the top.
Albon goes quicker in the Williams. Albon to the top, not for long, because here's Lando Norris now 0.5 second ahead. The times are tumbling all the way. The track is getting better, although we got a red flag out.
Red flag out onto the circuit, so that puts pay to the majority of the field who are on a lap. Albon getting it done, putting himself in the Williams up into second, and it's Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin on the exit of turn 11. That's on the run down to Jung Sao. Has found the wall. He's facing front in the Aston Martin. He said he's okay on the radio, but one Aston Martin in the wall at the end of Q2, and the other Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso now in the wall in the middle of Q3. So that really put pay to laps from Tsunoda had to come in right at the end, Charles Leclerc as well, Lawson too. So the clock stops though at 6 minutes and 59. Alonso out of the car and walking away with quite some determination.
Yeah, well, there's quite some damage going to be repaired in the Aston Martin garage, isn't there? Stroll crashing at the end of Q2. Alonso's found the barriers at the high-speed left coming through into towards the end of the middle sector. Walks away. Looks like he's gone front in. Actually doesn't look like it's done a huge amount of damage, but it's a fast section of circuit, so that would surprise me. Esteban Ocon had just done the fastest first sector of anyone, launching onto another flying lap. So the McLarens look settled on intermediates. They look like they're finding some confidence again. Charles Leclerc and George Russell less so. Esteban Ocon and Alex Albon look to be the underdogs on the charge. There's 6 minutes 59 seconds, so pretty much 7 minutes left on the clock. We will get restarted. The conditions look stable for the moment, but it will take a bit of time to clear that Aston Martin away.
So good news though for Lando Norris, who is fastest with the red flag, sits pretty at the top. Almost half a second clear of Alex Albon. Then comes Oscar Piastri. Ocon is fourth. George Russell the top five. Leclerc, Tsunoda, Lawson and Alonso registering down in ninth, but now out of the session. No Lance Stroll, who took part in this session. Also though, the big name to not be in this session and in that fight for pole position is indeed Max Verstappen. I'll tell you what though, we'll just hear from Max Verstappen in a moment, because we're just seeing a replay of Fernando Alonso's incident, Jolien.
Just sudden snap of oversteer, and I'll tell you what, that is a big crunch. Yeah, it's a high-speed section, that is damage.
Okay, mate. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, just a sudden snap coming through the left-hander. Problem is, in these conditions, once the car goes, it's so difficult to regain it. Your grip level's really marginal anyway. You're dancing on the edge, and once you just go whoosh, over the edge in a heartbeat, you're flying to the wall, and you're hoping that you get some level of magic reprieve, which no one's found yet.
Now, for that crash, it felt like the red flag was called pretty quickly. For Stroll's crash at the end of Q2, it felt like there was a bit more of a delay with that one.
Yeah, there was. I think because Stroll was still trying to drive the car back, he was moving out of the barriers, so the race director, quite rightly, was just trying to see if he could clear the car without having to wave the red flag and end the session. That'll be the answer. There was no chance for Alonso to drive back. The car was in a much worse state. I think it makes sense what the race director was doing. Even when we jumped on board with Stroll, as the red flag was flown, it was clear at that point the car was not going to go anywhere. But he was still trying to turn the car and hobble back. If you looked at the car, you'd see he wasn't going to go anywhere. But I think the race director would have hoped that Lance could get the car somehow going, and obviously it turned out there was no chance.
No, he couldn't get going again. That caused the red flag, and that meant Verstappen didn't get his lap in and was knocked out down in 12th spot. That will become 17th with the 5-place grid penalty. Let's hear what the Dutchman had to say after his qualifying efforts.
Yeah, I find it unbelievable. I mean, the car goes into the wall, broken, it's clearly destroyed, but they wait 30-40 seconds so everyone else can just complete their lap times, and of course the ones behind cannot even do a lap. I can't get my head around it, how that is possible to just let it go for 30 seconds, 40 seconds. And that of course ruined qualifying. We are already limited with the pits because we're on the back, so when you do the restart time you have to wait until you go out, so we're always in the back. But then it really blows my mind.
And what about the race? What are your chances from where you'll be
far in the back, so it will be quite difficult to pass around here with all the spray and the amount of rain, but we'll have a look.
Okay.
Unbelievable.
Okay, so Verstappen's frustration was obviously towards the race director rather than his own team at that point for not getting to the front of the queue. I just explained why I think the race director Niels Wittig waited to deploy the red flag. And I think that logic stands. I can understand from Verstappen's point of view, it's frustrating because he has seen in those seconds, Charles Leclerc got out in the first part of qualifying, wasn't it, earlier on, with a late the call by 1 second. I actually think when Stroll crashed, Verstappen was already in the drop zone. So if they had have immediately given the red flag, I think he was already down to 11th place and needed to improve. So in the end, it's the difference of Valtteri Bottas getting ahead potentially, and I don't think anyone else.
Norris. That's what he's angry about. Norris did his lap, I think, after Stroll.
Norris was already safe.
Was he?
Yeah.
All right. Maybe he's not sure about that.
I think he's not sure about it. So, but Norris was already up, and I think he was 6th or 5th, and then he went to the top, but he was already safe. So I think Verstappen was already in trouble, and then he had 30 seconds of his flying lap to try and get out of trouble. It was an ordinary flying lap. I don't know if it would have been enough, but it certainly wasn't lighting up the timing screens as he was on it. And then the red flag came, which completely nullified the session because there was no time to go again. But even if the red flag came immediately, it will have nullified the session because there was no time to do an outlap and get over the line before the checkered flag. So it's just simply about whether in the seconds from Stroll crashing to the red flag flying, enough cars got ahead of Verstappen to force the Dutchman out. And I think he was already in the drop zone. It was tight, but I can also understand the logic of the race director trying to keep the session going for as long as possible before seeing actually Stroll is stranded. That is the red flag there.
It's going to be a long day for Max Verstappen now with that 5-place grid penalty in these conditions as well. Only compounds his woes for the race because, as he said, when you've got the spray, it makes it 10 times harder to carve your way through the field.
Yeah, it does. If anyone can do it, Verstappen can do it. He is a maestro in these conditions. I still think he's got a charge in him. We've seen it before in 2016 in the completely soaking wet race. There was red flag interrupted. He had a mighty charge. Championship pressures are up there. He's going to have quite a gap between himself and Norris to haul in. I don't think he'll get that far, but he can certainly save a race. And you never know in these conditions. You have a red flag, you have safety cars at the right time. You can leap up the field if you call it right. So there's still opportunities for him. I think the frustration also comes from the call in the sprint yesterday, which it was very bad timing for Verstappen, the call for the VSC. Piastri was leading, Norris was second, McLaren were being really clumsy with orchestrating their team orders, which they eventually did, and Hülkenberg had his car parked just off the circuit for a long time before the VSC was called. Now eventually McLaren swapped the positions and then the VSC was called, but in many people's opinions, probably including myself, I think that VSC should have come earlier, and I think it let McLaren off the hook and it gave Norris an extra point. And I think that is another source of frustration. So Verstappen is obviously frustrated at what's happened there. Again, I don't think it's made a difference, but we'll double check. But off the back of yesterday, it's a continued frustration. And look, they're both under huge pressure, the title contenders.
There is about a few minutes until we go green again for Q4, 8:54 local time, and such is the key for track position that as soon as that call was made, George Russell and the two McLarens sent out into the pit lane to line up in their spot right at the end. The FIA just saying they need a few minutes to repair those barriers.
So I've just gone back through the timing data, okay, on the F1 app. The yellow flag in sector 3 of the lap, so that's Stroll's crash, is 1 minute 36 seconds before the start of the session. Norris is in the final sector at that point. He crosses the line at 1 minute 25 seconds. So there's 11 seconds between Stroll crashing and the yellow flag being thrown, and then Norris crossing the line, and then the red flag comes a little bit after that.
So I think we're talking, the difference is, I don't think Verstappen would have made it through.
Verstappen's already in the drop zone by then.
Yeah, so I think the difference is really he would have been 11th or 12th.
But Norris's lap was already ahead of Verstappen at that point. He wasn't in the drop zone.
No. Oh, I'll check back.
Norris was already ahead of Verstappen. He was in the top 10. He improved from about 7th to go top.
Well, while we double check that, we've got 2 minutes and 50 seconds on the clock.
Sorry, that's correct. He was 4th to go top. Yeah.
So there we have it then. So the margins there weren't quite as big as perhaps Verstappen thought they would have been in the end, qualifying down in 12th plus the 5. That would be 17. One man who did definitely find himself out after a crash. We've had 4 red flags. One of them was because of Carlos Sainz's incident into the Senna S's, and we can hear it from the Spaniard now.
Carlos, sorry to see what happened out there. First of all, are you all okay? And can you talk us through what happened?
Yeah, it was the first lap on Inters, and I clearly misjudged the grip. Honestly, I haven't been very comfortable with the car in the wet this year for some reason. And we were on the line and on the limit the whole session, and not enjoying that one. But we will try and see what we can do for later. But clearly a mistake, and not very happy.
Are you confident that the car can be fixed in time for the race later?
Should be possible, but you never know.
You never know for Carlos Sainz, who ended up in 14th, but there was a lot of hefty damage to the rear end of that Ferrari, and with the race, well, in a few hours' time, we now expect, after what Andrew was alluding to earlier, because we've had 4 red flags in this session delaying qualifying, carrying on, to get that 4-hour gap, but the race will have to be delayed.
Yeah, well, I think that was pretty much going to be an inevitability anyway, with the unpredictability. There was no margin for qualifying to happen and the race to happen on time if there was any red flag or any delay, and given the conditions, we didn't even know if we were going to get the start of Q1. So I think the FIA, they were clearly bringing the race forward, was ambitious, and it's still going to be ahead, but it's just loads of wriggle room for the day. And after having no qualifying yesterday, it's nice to see a bit of pragmatism come in, because it would be, we're here for the race, we want to see a race, and to just see it be timed out with dust coming and miserable conditions is nice, that there is more time, even if that time will be pushed back.
Yeah, but these miserable conditions expected to stay with us for the duration of the day, with rain at varying intensities throughout. But about 30 seconds then until we get the green light back away for the final part of Q3, with 6 minutes and 59 seconds on the clock.
George Russell has been sitting at the end of the pit lane for...
They went out with 5 minutes to go.
Yeah, 5 minutes of just sitting, getting a little bit wet in the drizzle. Intermediate tyres going to be stone cold, but they are desperate to get the track position that Norris has had the whole way. Norris is now second in the queue. We're about to go green in 3 seconds time, and Albon has also been a driver that's been getting to the front of the queue. It's no surprise that Norris and Albon are currently sitting P1 and 2, and Russell wants a little piece of that, so he's headed out first car this time.
And we are back underway then. 6 minutes and 46 seconds remain of Q3, and it's still grey, drizzling, overcast in Sao Paulo. The rain still coming down as Russell powers out of the pits with a huge plume of spray behind his Mercedes. You can barely even see the McLaren that emerges out behind him now. Just the fluorescent tip of the papaya McLaren now of Lando Norris, heading himself down towards turn 4, and the fight for pole position. Norris really has a big chance here to get good points, set himself up for good points in the Grand Prix later on today, and eat in to that now 44-point gap between himself and Max Verstappen. Verstappen still with the advantage in the World Championship, but this so far is going the way of Norris and McLaren after a good sprint result as well yesterday, with both McLarens playing the team game. Piastri set for the win, let his teammate through. Piastri now laying the benchmark that he will help his teammate as long as his teammate still has a fighting chance.
So brand new intermediate tyres for the 8 drivers left in this. George Russell heads up the hill, and he'll get a flying lap on the board first. He's about to start it, sweeping past the pit entry, building the speed. Still loads of spray coming off the tyres, the inter tyres of the Mercedes. But here he goes on the brakes for the first corner. He's about to find the most treacherous zone on the circuit, and he has a big oversteer coming through the apex of turn 1, through turn 2, and now caressing the throttle pedal, trying not to snap his way to the barriers through turn 3, and he's cleanly through there.
Qualified 5th last weekend in Mexico did George Russell. Currently sits in 5th once again, but struggles to get it turned in and runs out wide through turn 4, and that will be lap over for Russell, trying to get those tyres up for temperatures. You said, Jolien, even with the outlap, he was waiting at the end of the pit lane for so long. Those tyres dropping down to almost nothing when it comes to temperature, and out wide he runs.
The grip level not immediately there for anyone. Norris is now the first car that should get a time on the board. Russell will have to dig deep and go again on the next lap, down in 5th place at the moment of the 8 cars that are left in this. Alonso will be 9th, Stroll will be 10th and taking no further part. The 2 Aston Martins have crashed, so it's just who is going to take those 8 positions. The track doesn't look wetter than it has been. It still looks very wet and slippery, but the grip level is very low, and everyone is fighting the car a huge amount. There's a yellow flag at turn 4.
Yeah, well, Tsunoda just saying has gone well through the first sector, and I think it might be Tsunoda who's found the runoff at turn 4 in the RB.
Norris is fighting the car so much coming out of turn 12. The grip level looks very, very low. Was it just the fact that the tyres are cooling down? Norris comes through and is nowhere near an improvement. He's a second away. It's green flag once again, and the grip level is it's nowhere. Charles Leclerc almost spinning.
Leclerc having to go full opposite lock to keep his Ferrari pointing in the right direction, coming through turn 10, and now backs well out of it in the approach to Zhengzhou. Another yellow flag out, and that has become a red flag, and it's the Williams. It's our 5th red flag of qualifying, and it's another big hit, this time for Alex Albon. He says he's okay, but the rear of that Williams car is absolutely demolished.
Okay, that is the biggest hit so far from anyone. It's Alex Albon, and that looks like it's the entry to turn 1. He's not scrubbed off any speed, and he's backed the car into the wall. He's sitting in second place, and he's so frustrated with himself, hitting the halo. Thankfully, he's okay, because that car is a complete mess, and the red flag is out. There's 3 minutes 31 seconds left on the clock. It wouldn't surprise me if they called it from this position right now. There's technically time for one flyer, but the track looks so low grip anyway. Albon receives the attention of the medical crew. He is going to be able to jump out of the car, I think, under his own steam. But that is going to be the toughest repair job of anyone, and it's for a man that is provisionally second on the grid.
It's another big crash as well for a Williams car, as Albon tentatively gets out with the help of the medical delegate, and the marshals now rushing over with the recovery vehicles to remove that Williams. The barrier looks like it's taken a fair whack as well.
And remember, Colapinto was the first crash, so both Williams are in pieces. Right now, the Williams crew will likely abandon Colapinto's repair, and they will build up a spare car for Alex Albon. That is going to be an entire chassis change for Albon. This is how it happened. This is going to be the sound, or not, of him, but he just locked the rear heading into turn 1, and that's the sound of the crunch of the barriers.
Did the brakes fail?
We're checking. Oh, Alex, are you okay?
Yeah.
We're checking on the brakes. So from our side, brakes look okay. You can still hear me.
Looked like he maybe just got onto the white line on the outside as he hit the brakes and just lost the rear immediately. And the runoff on the right-hand side on the entry to turn 1 is minimal, and the speed is maximum at that point. You're coming at the end of such a long 1.3 kilometre straight, and then trying to find some deceleration. But when you brake on the white line, you're getting none of that, and Albon plunged immediately into the wall at such high speed. It's a really big crash, but it is great to see that Albon's at least okay. He'll be bruised at the very least from that.
Frustration from Albon, as we just saw the moments after he crashed. He put his hands on his helmet and with his head down almost into the cockpit of his car. Real frustration there for the Williams team, who will have a big job now. As you say, though, Albon, if it doesn't get restarted, well, he's sitting up in second at the moment. This is how the order is currently, with the red flag out. Norris, Albon, Piastri, the top 3. Esteban Ocon's up in 4th ahead of Russell. Charles Leclerc 6th. Tsunoda ahead of Lawson, the 2 RBs 7th and 8th. No Aston Martin's taking part anymore after Lance Stroll crashed out in Q2. He's 10th, and Alonso crashing out in Q3 remains 9th.
The problem for Albon is, I think that's going to be a change of chassis, which is going to be a pit lane start for him. And all of the hard work that he's done, all of the work that Williams have done, they cannot rebuild that car, because I can't imagine that car is not entirely destroyed down to the chassis, at which point, if he starts the race, it's going to be from the pits. So maybe at that point you do just repair the less damaged car of Colapinto and get him in the race from what would be 18th position. The day has just gone so badly in a moment there for Williams. They were looking like being the plucky underdog to take the fight to the McLarens. Instead, they're out, and Piastri had a spin as well at the same time and was so lucky to keep it out of the barriers down at turn 2. Conditions were awful, but it's Alex Albon that is going to be he's had the biggest whack, and he's now under jeopardy for the race.
Tsunoda as well, coming into turn 4 on the grass, spinning backwards, lucky to keep it out of the wall into the gravel, but kept one tyre out onto the tarmac, was able to get going again.
This is the jeopardy of the session. You've got to be quick. There are title pressures at stake. There are huge opportunities up for grabs, not just for Norris and Verstappen, for Ferrari. Charles Leclerc's down in 6th. That's not that good for the only remaining Ferrari in Q3. The underdogs want to have the best day of their season and a memorable day to try and get to the front. But if you over push just slightly, if you go too hard, find a wet patch, keep your foot in too much, the jeopardy is through the roof. And Albon has just shown 0 to 0 in a flash, but Norris could have had that, Piastri could have had that. All the big guns have been flirting with danger for the entire qualifying.
Yeah, so two things. The race start has been delayed, definitely. We haven't got that confirmed from the FIA, but it has to be just for the rules. Now, just to go back to that timing question, the controversy around Verstappen. So the yellow is thrown at 1 minute 36 to go in the session, all right? At that point, Verstappen is 10th. That's at 1 minute 35 seconds. At 1 minute 34 seconds, Charles Leclerc crosses the line and bumps Verstappen down to 11th place. So 2 seconds after they first throw the yellow flag. Then they don't throw the red flag for another 40 seconds after that. 50 seconds, actually. So Verstappen's got a point in a way, but 2 seconds, there's no way a track goes yellow to red in 2 seconds. It just doesn't happen.
No, you normally allow a minimum 10 seconds. Even when Fernando Alonso hit the barriers, it's a yellow flag for a while whilst the race director can see what's happened. The yellow flags are immediate. So, okay, effectively he was 10th, but the reality is he was 11th in any sense of normality there, as Leclerc managed to just sneak in. So he was already going to be out. I can understand the frustration for him, because this should be a Verstappen conditioned day. And let's not forget, Norris was really lucky to get through Q1. He was 15th, struggling, scrabbling around. This could have been complete role reversal of Verstappen starting easily in the top 10 and Norris down in 16th. But at the end of Q2, it's turned on its head, and I just think Red Bull could have got Verstappen to the front of the queue, given him a double shot. I don't know what happened on Max's lap, but the actual red flag, yellow flag, red flag for Lance Stroll is just plain unlucky to me.
Marshall's working ferociously to get the barriers on the exit of Turn 1 repaired. No official wording from the race control yet as to what is going to get going.
It's going to get restarted, isn't it?
Yeah, they're all ready to go.
Yeah, it's going to be restarted in 3.5 minutes. Yeah. So Norris is still sitting in the car. He's about to now launch down to the front of the field. Another new set of intermediates on his McLaren. There is going to be one flying lap in this, possibly two if you're the first car down. So it's even more of a mad dash now to get to the front of the queue. And what are the conditions going to be like? There's still now 7 cars left in contention.
And Esteban Ocon in the Alpine is sitting ahead of all of them in the pit lane. Ocon in the Alpine, before the red flag, was up to 4th place. Ocon, who has been flying in that Alpine all weekend long, off the back of some pretty dismal weekends for the Frenchman. His teammate Pierre Gasly has had the better of him, not so much on this occasion. These conditions really allowing Ocon, who is seeing out his career with Alpine at the end of this year, to fly. He'll join Haas next year, so Ocon could well be the hero come the end of Q3.
So Ocon is 4th, which could well be 3rd by the time Alex Albon has a non-start or a pit lane start. He's got a brilliant opportunity here because he's gone down to the pits first. Russell did that before, but they've not done it this time, Mercedes. And I think that was quite a late call from race director to say when it was going to go. And Mercedes were not ready to send George Russell to the front, or they didn't want to, because last time his tyres were just not up to temperature and he didn't get a good lap in anyway. So when this goes in 2 minutes 20 seconds time, here's Norris.
We think there'll be some Class 1 raining starting imminently, which will last to the end of the session.
So that's drizzle to come for the last sort of 4 minutes. When this session goes, Ocon might get 2 laps. Norris might get 2 laps. Piastri is unlikely to get 2. Everyone else is in for 1 flying lap. And that's going to settle the grid for the Brazilian Grand Prix later.
And we've had 5 red flags already throughout this qualifying session. It is so tricky, the conditions out on circuit. We're about 1 minute and 42 seconds away. Here's Norris again.
Lando, difficult message for me to pass. If the conditions are slower, just be sensible. Obviously, the race is in a few hours.
So that's Will Joseph on the radio talking to Lando Norris. They do not want to see that car in pieces like so many are already in.
And look, this is such a difficult position. At the moment, Norris is having a fairy tale session. He's at the top. Verstappen will start 17th. The championship is nudging down. This could be a huge opportunity for him. If he goes out and tries to fight for the last 10th against people he might not need to beat. No, it may be that no one improves, but if he has a big crash like Alex Albon, it flips completely on its head again in that moment, and Verstappen becomes major advantage out of all of this session, even though he starts 17th. So everything is still on a knife edge with 1 lap to go.
Will Lando Norris take it easy on his final flying attempts when we get underway? 37 seconds to go. Class 1 rain, that's how McLaren describe it. Light drizzle, but the radar is showing rain all throughout today. Indeed, the rain has been non-stop so far, on and off, and varying levels of intensity. The top 10 shootout, then Q3 slowly getting underway soon. The top 10, though, will be down to 8 because we won't have any Aston Martins, no Stroll, no Alonso, and now no Alex Albon in the Williams. Just to come back to that Williams chat, Jolien, do we seriously think there's a strong possibility that Williams only start the Grand Prix later today with 1 car?
I can't see how they repair both. I mean, we were talking when Colapinto crashed of can they get that into the race. Now, they would have done. It wasn't such a big hit, but they've just had an absolutely whopping hit on the other side of the garage. So for the second time this year, I think this will be a 1-car Williams Grand Prix.
Green light on at the end of the pit lane. Q3 back underway. 3 minutes and 15 seconds counting. And Esteban Ocon in the Alpine leads them out. Norris letting a gap form in the pit lane before he suddenly gets up to speed. And this is the sound of Ocon heading down to the left-hander of turn 4. He will have the best view in the house. Nobody in front of him. And as you say, Jolien, the best possibility of getting 2 flying laps in.
I quite fancy Ocon for a front row here. He's going to get 2 flying laps. He's already got confidence and he's got the clear track ahead of him for the moment. Norris has given Ocon a huge amount of space as they come out. Ocon is now in towards Pinarino, the left-hander at the bottom of the hill at turn 8, as Norris climbs up the double right of Ferradura, turns 6 and 7. I don't know if Norris is going to get 2 laps. I don't think he is with the space he's left. It's going to be really marginal. Ocon will, and that could mean he's the last car on the circuit doing a lap, and he's already got 1 lap worth of knowledge. So it's a big advantage for Ocon to leave that pits first.
Monaco 2023, Esteban Ocon qualified in the top 3. Right now, he's just on the periphery of that in 4th and on his out lap now. George Russell in the Mercedes electing to wait a little longer before he heads out of the pit lane. He's still the last one in there. Everybody else who is in this session is out on track. As Ocon begins his first flyer, coming into the set of S's, but he stamps on the brakes and he almost struggles to turn it into the left-hander, saves the Alpine, then slings it through the right-hander. The second part of the set of S's has a bit of trouble there, but has somehow survived to tell the tale and is now heading down towards turn 4.
On the limit, but is not quick with it. Norris will get 2 laps and Piastri will get 2 laps as well. Possibly even Charles Leclerc will get 2 flying laps, and Norris has done a good first sector. There's still grip out there, and this pole position could be decided by the final flying lap.
Through the first sector then for Lando Norris and his teammate Oscar Piastri. Piastri down on time, hugely, about a second in the first sector. Norris keeping it neat and tidy at the moment and looking to improve his lap time. Ocon is just making his way through the final sector now. We'll see what Ocon will deliver, but Leclerc also out there on the circuit.
Ocon's the fastest man of anyone in the middle sector, so Ocon is in a position to jump up the order. Norris is the only one of the main contenders improving on this lap, but Norris, Piastri and Leclerc will all get 1 more flying lap. Everyone else is going to be in for a one-shot wonder. Norris also improving marginally, but it's neck and neck with Esteban Ocon.
Ocon's had a brilliant middle sector, fastest of the whole session we've seen so far. Esteban Ocon to the line, then crosses it, improves his time, but actually doesn't improve his position. Stays in 4th. This is the sound of Lando Norris getting across the line with 23 seconds to go. Improves his lap time, but not by much, less than a 1/10 of a second, but crucially cements his position in provisional pole. Piastri doesn't improve, crosses the line, stays in 3rd, and Norris sliding straight off through turn 1. But what about Charles Leclerc across the line? What's Leclerc got? No, Norris won't get his 2nd lap in.
It's Piastri that's gone off. Norris will. Piastri's made a mistake at the first corner. Norris is improving. Yuki Tsunoda was flying in the middle sector and he's still going very quickly. Even though the RBs here could be about to throw a fly right into that ointment, Lawson's pretty close to Norris through 2 sectors.
Yeah, Norris now going through towards the right-hander of turn 8. Still still on his lap then. Lando Norris did make it across the line with 20 seconds to go. Norris, Albon still sitting in second, now out of this session. Piastri third, then comes Ocon. Russell the top five, haven't seen what Russell's got yet. Lawson to the line, crosses it to go second fastest, takes the checkered flag as well. What about his teammate Yuki Tsunoda in the other RB? Beats his teammate, the Japanese driver, now up into second as Norris through the middle sector, fastest of anybody.
Russell's going quickly as well in the Mercedes. Ocon jumps up to third. Norris is going the quickest of all though.
Good lap from Esteban Ocon, splits the RB drivers. George Russell finding time too. What's it going to be for Norris when he crosses the line? Finds nearly 7/10 of a second, cements his position on pole. This, the sound of George Russell making his way round the final two left-handers now to the line. The checkered flag is out. Russell currently sits seventh, gets himself up to the front row, takes the checkered flag. Second place for Russell. Leclerc cannot find the improvement he needs. He's down in sixth place. Albon has fallen all the way down to seventh. Nobody is going quicker. Piastri threw his lap chances away in turn one, running out wide. He comes into the pits. He'll have to settle for eighth. But for Lando Norris, in tricky conditions, when this man looked on edge all throughout the first part of qualifying, gets the job done, and it's Lando Norris who will start the Sao Paulo Grand Prix on pole position. Alongside him will be George Russell. Yuki Tsunoda starts third for RB. Esteban Ocon fourth for Alpine, and Liam Lawson in the other RB. That is your top five.
Well, how about delivering under pressure there for Lando Norris? And he had to, because George Russell put in a beauty of a lap on his one shot with Mercedes and got himself to the front row. There was less than 2/10 between them.
All right, Yuki Tsunoda P3 tomorrow.
Well done team, all of us.
And there we go. The man that's third will start alongside Esteban Ocon, but he beat the Frenchman to third place. We were talking about Ocon, Albon, Alonso potentially doing something amazing. In the end, Yuki Tsunoda has got himself to third.
At a time where, well, both RB drivers are wanting to impress. Tsunoda getting the job done, but you have to say hats off for Liam Lawson as well, making top two RBs in the top five. But it's Tsunoda who pulls up into the P3 slot. Norris slides into P1, and Russell will come into the P2.
So you know what? I think staying in the garage was the better call in the end. Those that went to the end of the pit lane, Norris did get pole position and he managed to make it work. Ocon was fourth, decent job from him improving on the final lap. But Piastri struggled for grip, went off at turn one, and he's only eighth on the grid out of an 8-car field at the end, or even Alex Albon wasn't in the field to improve. So it's not gone well for Piastri, and Leclerc was the other man that queued, and he's only sixth in the Ferrari. Those RBs and George Russell, that are all second, third and fifth now, went out with warm intermediates and they found the grip. They trusted that they could do it on one lap, and they did. They just couldn't beat Lando Norris to pole.
Seventh pole position of the season for Lando Norris. Fifth pole in 7 races for the Brits, who takes the advantage. Of course, the race happening today in, well, the minimum time is 4 hours. Yuki Tsunoda climbs out of his car and a little fist in the air runs over to some of his mechanics and engineers. It's not quite race day to celebrate a podium, but for Tsunoda, a P3 in qualifying, his best, looking absolutely outstanding in these conditions. Lawson backing him up in fifth. Esteban Ocon too, consistently quick throughout all 3 sessions. His best start all year by quite some margin. Ocon will line up in fourth.
What a qualifying session that was. Drama throughout from Q1. It was a long time ago that Lewis Hamilton went out, and Lando Norris, that was a sliding doors moment, wasn't it? Norris sneaking through in Q1 by a tiny margin, with no grip and no confidence, and then you fast forward 15 minutes and Verstappen is out in Q2 and Norris has found his feet.
Well, after that qualifying session, let's hear what the top 3 had to say. We'll hear them talking to IndyCar winner James Hinchcliffe down in Parc Fermé. Norris on pole, alongside him George Russell and Yuki Tsunoda rounding out the top 3 as they make their way over to be interviewed in a rainy Sao Paulo pit lane. The rain expected to continue all day long. The race, well, 4 hours the minimum time. Let's hear though from from James Klitschid talking to our pole sitter.
Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Lando Norris, pole sitter for the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. 8th pole of your career, but this one did not come easy. Lando, just talk to us about the entire qualifying, Q1, Q2, Q3, conditions changing, red flags, threw everything at you, but you still came out on top.
Yeah, it was a lot going on today, but super happy because I was struggling a lot at the beginning of qualifying. I had a lot of work to do, so I was not comfortable at all. So to end up on pole, I worked at it a lot through qualifying. I had a lot of areas I needed to improve on, but I did exactly that. So a little surprised again. I mean, I've been surprised a little bit lately, but a little bit surprised to be on pole. But some nice laps. I felt good in the end, and a good result for us.
From the driver's seat, how tough is it when every time you're on the racetrack over that qualifying session, conditions are changing, sometimes even lap to lap, it's changing. How tough is it to judge where the limit is?
Probably more than it looks on TV at times. It's just, you're always trying to find that next little bit, but I mean, you saw how many people were going off and crashing and locking up, so it was easy to end up badly, you know, and end up in a wall or do something where you might not even make the race later today, you know. So that risk reward was not easy today, especially from where I was in Q1. I found it very tough to know how much more can I push. So that's why I'm happy, because it's relieving qualifying after something like this. So very happy at the same time.
So right before that last green, after that final red, Will Joseph came on the radio and said, hey, huge opportunity here. Let's not do anything silly.
Yeah.
You still pushed. You still went faster every lap, but let's look ahead to the race. Obviously, from a championship standpoint, huge implications. Does that at all change your mindset going into the event, or is it just eyes forward going for the win?
No, eyes forward. I mean, I got some quick guys behind. George put in a nice lap. Yuki's been flying in the wet all day today, so it's never easy in these conditions. It's never as much as just settling down and getting on with it. As that is what I would like to do. It's not always the easiest thing, you know. So we'll see. We'll prepare well. I hope we can get a race in. That will be a good start, and excited to see what we can do.
Yeah, no man wants a race to happen more than this guy. Lando Norris, your pole sitter. George Russell, incredible result here. It's been a bit of a struggle for you guys with this race car around this newly paved track. Big cheers from the crowds for the effort, though. You must be one of the guys that was kind of happy when you pulled up this morning and it still looked like it was going to be a wet session.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always love coming to Sao Paulo, obviously, such great memories from a few years ago. And after yesterday, it was so tough just waiting, and you know, all the fans stayed out, and honestly, this morning I was so impressed coming into the track at 6 o'clock. Everybody was queuing, everybody wanted to be here, and really pleased to be lining up P2.
Now let's talk about that coming into the track at 6 o'clock. This is a very different Sunday for you. This is not normally how your Grand Prix Sundays go. How does having qualifying this morning, having the race brought up a little bit earlier, change how you prepare and you focus on the race?
I love that, to be honest. It reminded me of the karting days, you know, waking up, having breakfast in your race suit, and just going out there and driving. So, yeah, maybe the guys need to have a bit of a think about the format moving forward. Maybe this is the one, you know, qualifying Sunday morning. As I said, it was a great session, but let's see what we can do in the race.
Absolutely. You won here in 22. Let's see if you can do it again today. Cheers. And up next, big cheers from the crowd for Yuki Tsunoda. Congratulations, Yuki. Top 3 start here in Sao Paulo. Best career start under incredibly difficult conditions. Just walk us through your session and the challenge of getting that perfect lap in those tricky conditions.
Yeah, it was very tricky. Certainly I enjoyed it. I think we had a good pace from straight away, max stream. Had a couple of mistakes, but yeah, had a bit of luck as well. I think overall as a team, including Liam as well, we did a really, really good job.
Yuki, as a driver, how tough is it to balance that risk versus reward, especially when you're seeing other drivers crash, have incidents, when you know the Grand Prix is just in a few hours and that a big incident could eliminate you from even starting the race?
Yeah, I mean, this track especially probably is one of the trickiest track. You know, once you start building confidence and you try to over-push a little bit, you have massive consequence like we saw multiple cars today. And I had one big moment, and luckily I was away from the barrier. But yeah, it's certainly also the track you want to nail it. But yeah, I felt much better than yesterday. The car felt good. I think we had a good pace in the rain as well. So it's a good place to start for today.
And just real quickly, your teammate Liam Lawson also up there. Huge opportunity for you guys in the constructors battle with both Haas cars going out early. Are you guys very focused on collecting maximum points and trying to close that gap?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we are slightly behind P6, especially Haas, so we need definitely catching up. And this is the moments that we want to maximize opportunity. So yeah, as a team, we do as much as we can to score as much as possible.
Looking super quick in the wet, probably doing the rain dance a little bit before the Grand Prix. Best of luck.
Thank you.
James Hinchcliffe there talking to our top three for the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, lining up on the grid. Lando Norris on pole position, alongside him George Russell and Yuki Tsunoda third for RB. Then it was Ocon, Lawson the top five, Charles Leclerc down in sixth, Albon seventh, but will that Williams get out after big damage during that session? Piastri only eighth, Alonso and Stroll for Aston Martin ninth and 10th, with again damage to both of those cars. Bottas ahead of Verstappen on the road in 12th. Of course, Verstappen will get a 5-place grid penalty. That'll knock him down. Perez, Sainz, Gasly qualified 15th. Hamilton down in 16th ahead of Behrman. Then comes Franco Colapinto, also another one to cause a red flag with damage on his Williams. Nico Hülkenberg 19th and Zhou Guanyu 20th and last. Well, Jolien, we got a qualifying session in the end. What a quali it was. And this is another swing towards Lando Norris, isn't it? This is exactly how he needed today to pan out.
It is better than he could have possibly imagined. Pole position, Verstappen to start 17th. I don't know if that would become 16th with Albon, depending on what happens to that Williams. But even so, when so much could have gone wrong in that session for Norris, and he was almost out in Q1, for it to have flipped on its head and he's on pole with Verstappen right down the order is absolutely massive. But there's still a race to come, and that was the most chaotic qualifying I can remember for such a long time. Even Yuki Tsunoda, I forgot that he was pointing backwards heading to the barrier on the previous lap than where he bolted it up to the top three. He could have Alex Albon'd it.
5 red flags during that session. I think that's the most I've seen in a qualifying for quite some time. But it does just showcase the mettle that you need in your driver skill set to be in it right to the very end, to get that lap in time.
Is coping with pressure in the big moments, and all of them had it. More on Norris and Verstappen with everything at stake. But, you know, Yuki Tsunoda's not going to get chances like this too often. George Russell's got a brilliant chance as well. Leclerc's only 6th. Sainz is way back, having crashed. Piastri's back. Verstappen and Perez are both back. This is a massive opportunity for George Russell to go hunting another win as well. And he delivered at the end. But they've got to do it again in the race in a few hours' time.
It certainly is. We don't know exactly when that race time will be now. There's got to be a minimum of 4 hours between the end of qualifying and the start of the Grand Prix. Keep an eye on BBC Sports Socials for that. Thank you to Andrew. Thank you to Jolien. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live. Lando Norris starts on pole for the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. We will see you a little later, but for now, we can head over to live FA Cup action. MK Dons take on AFC Wimbledon.
MK Dons manager Scott Lindsay has just done a little...